Chapter 507. Ancestor Nanming came slowly, glanced at the two people standing opposite each other and shook his head slightly. Based on his relationship with them, he did not have the right to stop them. Glancing at Zi, who was staring with her head raised, Ancestor Nanming flashed over and directly banged his head on Zi's head, reprimanding her. Are you tired of living? This is an adult's matter. Why are you here, little girl? Although he and Nongzhu were entangled, they were still friends. Although he could not control Bai Tongchun and Wen Lanfeng, he still had to control Zi. Zi rubbed her head and cried in pain, but Ancestor Nanming dragged her down and threw her back to Shuntian Island. Below, an old man and two women stared at the scene with wide eyes. What do you want from me? Bai Chongchun asked the same question again. His tone was indifferent, without worry, fear, anxiety, or impatience, without the slightest emotion. His voice was ordinary and ordinary, like an ordinary old man asking a question. Unlike Wen Lanfeng, who could casually stir up an echo between heaven and earth. A trace of bitterness appeared on Wen Lanfeng's face. From Bai Chongchun's words and eyes, he could see that he was arrogant and did not take him seriously at all. This courage alone was not something an ordinary person could have. He was indeed the world's #1 expert. Wen Lanfeng's momentum was already slightly inferior. Bai Chongchun, the battle that year made me reflect on the painful experience and I cultivated in seclusion for 100 years. Today I come. Before Wen Lanfeng could finish, he heard someone shouting in the distance. Old Bai, Wen Lanfeng, let's talk it out, let's talk it out. Nongzhu saw the two people confronting each other in midair from afar. Seeing that they had not started fighting, she hurriedly shouted. Oh my god. This trip didn't tire me to death and I finally made it. Nongzhu inserted herself between the two people and said in a somewhat dispirited manner. It seemed that she had indeed used all her strength to fly all the way here, and the genuine vitality in her body was greatly consumed. In the mysterious wave light ball in his hand, Hibiscus was like an imprisoned kitten, looking at Bai Chongchun and Wen Lanfeng pitifully. The unperturbed Bai Chongchun and Wen Lanfeng both looked at the people he brought with him in surprise. They were puzzled. Why did this guy catch a woman? Ancestor Nanming also flashed into the air when he saw Nongzhu coming. He glanced at Hibiscus and asked Nongzhu, Nongzhu, are you acting like a playboy again? Shut your stinky mouth. Nongzhu then added, will you die if you don't watch the fun? Don't you know how to persuade him? He seemed to be blaming Ancestor Nanming for not coming out to mediate. Ancestor opened his mouth but did not know what to say. Nongzhu too, Hibiscus, Hibiscus and Hibiscus. The few old fellows were just about to discuss business when they heard Zi exclaim, Ah, Feng, why are you here? Hibiscus. Zi, why are you here? Hibiscus said in surprise. When they were on supporting Immortal Island, Yu Qianchou had brought Zi over once. The two of them knew each other and knew that the other had a good relationship with Yu Qianchou. The two women threw everything to the back of their minds and started chatting. The tense atmosphere between the two great experts of the world, which was on the verge of breaking out, was instantly destroyed by these two girls. Ancestor Nanming elbowed Nongzhu and asked, Hey, who is this Hibiscus? Bai Chongchun and Wen Lanfeng could not remember whose daughter Feng was. Nongzhu would not bring an ordinary person to Shuntian Island. However, the two of them didn't know that Hibiscus was just a small disciple of supporting Immortal Island. Given their status, who would care about a mere Fuxian Island? Moreover, he was just a disciple on the island. Naturally, he wouldn't remember who Hibiscus was. Damn it. Don't get touchy. How am I supposed to know? Nongzhu retracted his elbow and stared at the two girls. He had raised Zi since she was young. He was her father, her mother, and her master. In short, Zi grew up in the purple bamboo forest and never had a friend, let alone a close friend. When he saw Zi and Hibiscus chattering happily, he suddenly realized that he was wrong, very wrong. Nonsense. Ancestor Nanming pointed below and questioned, If you don't know who she is, how can you bring her here? If you don't know who she is, how can she know Zi? Who are you trying to fool? How would I know? Yu Qianchou didn't tell me. Nongzhu was also a little gloomy. Hearing that it was related to his disciple, Bai Chongchun looked over and asked, Nongzhu, what's going on? Nongzhu was stunned and then said with a smile, Yu Qianchou said that this girl is his woman. He said that it would be dangerous if she followed him, so he asked me to bring her here to avoid the danger. Bai Chongchun and Ancestor Nanming were stunned at the same time. They stared at Hibiscus and sized her up. Wen Lanfeng's head was filled with bewilderment, but he was quite surprised. He thought to himself, who is Yu Qianqiu? How come I've never heard of him? He must be an extraordinary person to be able to make Nongzhu run errands and make Bai Chongqun and ancestor Nanming lose their composure. He had been in closed-door training for 100 years and Yu Qianqiu's previous life wasn't even born yet. How could he know who Yu Qianqiu was? It was enough for him to think about it slowly. Among the 4 people in the sky, 3 of them were the 4 great men of the cultivation world. They were only missing Lu Yanqing from Lingfang Valley. Ever since Zi and Yu Qianqiu toured the world of sensual pleasures, she was a little wild. Being trapped in Shuntian Island was boring, so she practiced the awkward, animal play, every day to kill time. Hibiscus's arrival made her a little too excited. Finally she had a companion. Yu Qianqiu is too much. He brought you out to play but he didn't bring me along. So dangerous outside. What's there to be afraid of? Danger is fun. If there's no danger, why would I go out with that guy? As Zi said this, Nongzhu's face immediately turned as black as the bottom of a pot. Ancestor Nanming, who was at the side, looked at her and laughed. He thought that this girl was really funny and could compete with her master. It's really dangerous. It's not fun. Last time Yu Qianqiu was beaten to the point of vomiting blood. I was scared to death. Yu Qianqiu was beaten to the point of vomiting blood? It can't be. That guy is very bad. Who can injure him? Is he okay? As soon as these 2 sentences were spoken, a somewhat oppressive aura filled the air. The breeze blowing around them instantly stopped. As the 2 girls spoke, they also felt that something was wrong. When they suddenly turned around, they suddenly found that the 4 experts in the sky were staring at them. Zi stuck out her tongue. The 2 girls shrunk in embarrassment and did not dare to say another word. What a strong aura. When Lanfeng's pupils shrank. She slowly turned to look at Bai Chongqun. She thought that he was going to fight, but she found that he was staring at Nongzhu. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming looked at each other, then secretly turned their heads to look back. Nongzhu found that Bai Chongqun was staring at her and could not help but smile awkwardly. Bai Chongqun indifferently asked word by word, Nongzhu, who hurt Yu Qianqiu? Old Bai, don't think about it. His skin is rough and his flesh is thick. He has already recovered from a minor injury. Nongzhu said and shook her head with a bitter smile. She said, in fact that guy asked for it. He claimed to be the world's #1 expert below the deification stage. It would be strange if people did not find trouble with him. I'll tell you in detail later. The aura of fear disappeared in an instant. Bai Chongqun was stunned. He claimed to be the world's #1 expert, but his disciple ran out and claimed to be the world's #1 expert below the deification stage. If people knew that she was his disciple, it would really make him proud. When Lanfeng could not help asking, Nongzhu, who is this Yu Qianqiu? Why have I never heard of him? Nongzhu smiled and raised her chin toward Bai Chongqun. She said, his last disciple. When Lanfeng uttered an ah and then hesitated. A famous master produces a brilliant disciple. No wonder he dares to claim to be the world's #1 expert below the deification stage. He must be worthy of it. Although it was a perfunctory compliment, it sounded a little harsh. Bai Chongqun's calm face was slightly dark. It seemed that he felt ashamed for the first time in his long life. Nongzhu secretly thought, when Lanfeng, you really want to die. Aren't you being sarcastic? Sure enough, after Bai Chongqun's face calmed down, he stared at Wen Lanfeng indifferently and said, from what you said before, do you mean that after 100 years of closed-door training, your cultivation has greatly improved and you came here to wash away your shame? Who was Wen Lanfeng? He was not a coward who was afraid to fight. He was provoked by Bai Chongqun's words on the spot and his previous worries were immediately thrown out of the window. This was the true arrogance of a top expert. He would never retreat in the face of a battle and would only concentrate on one thing, to defeat his opponent. Life or death, victory or defeat, these were things to be considered after the battle. When Lanfeng laughed heartily and replied in a sonorous voice, the battle 100 years ago, when Lanfeng will never forget it. The 100 years of closed-door training is just to be qualified to meet the punishment master of the demon ghost region again. Today, I would like to experience the demeanor of the world's #1 expert again. The last sentence was particularly impassioned. Don't get excited, don't get excited. Nongzhu waved her hand anxiously between the 2. However, both of them had entered a state of high spirits and simply ignored Nongzhu. when Lanfeng's whole body erupted with a strong fighting spirit. His grayish-white robe suddenly fluttered despite the absence of wind, stirring the surrounding airflow to gradually solidify and appear like blades. Ancestor Nanming quickly released a transparent protective upstanding qi, but unexpectedly he still felt a little overwhelmed. The wind blades constantly made ear-piercing sounds on the upstanding qi, and the entire protective upstanding qi could be destroyed by the wind blades at any time. This was the turbulence caused by the light qi ji before they started fighting. What would happen if they started fighting? Ancestor Nanming's eyes were full of horror. Wen Lanfeng was indeed worthy of his reputation as the world's second expert, but he did not expect him to be so powerful. It was far beyond his understanding of experts in the late stage of the incarnation realm. Without another word, Ancestor Nanming retreated in the face of difficulties. This was not a place where he could stay with his cultivation, so he quickly flashed back to the island. Nongzhu also had a protective upstanding qi, but her cultivation was obviously higher than Ancestor Nanming's. She shouted, "You two lunatics. There is no deep hatred between you two. Will you only be satisfied when you fight to the death? Get out of the way." Wen Lanfeng shouted. His qi ji locked onto Nongzhu and the dancing wind blades immediately swept over, cutting Nongzhu's protective upstanding qi to the point that it almost collapsed. Nongzhu immediately felt that she could not take it anymore and she shouted, "You two lunatics, just die. You're making me worry less." As soon as she finished speaking, she quickly fled and was forced to leave. Bai Changchun, who was opposite Wen Lanfeng, was very quiet. His expression was indifferent, so quiet that it was a little ridiculous. He did not make as much noise as Wen Lanfeng. His clothes, beard and hair did not even move in the chaotic wind. Wen Lanfeng's eyes were bright as he stared at Bai Changchun. The wind blades crazily swept towards Bai Changchun, but when they were 2 meters away from his body, the wind blades silently and inexplicably collapsed and disappeared. They had no effect on Bai Changchun. The few people on the island stared at him and Lady Mu bit her lip. She already knew what was going to happen. She did not expect that she would have the opportunity to see the torture envoy, who was famous in the demon domain, in action. She did not know who the other person was, but he actually dared to challenge the torture envoy. "It seems that you've really made a lot of progress in the past 100 years of hard cultivation. You can't be compared to the past. No wonder you have the confidence to come to me," Bai Changchun said lightly. "I also feel that I've made a lot of progress." Wen Lanfeng nodded and asked, "How do I compare to you?" "I don't know my own cultivation level, and I've been looking forward to someone who can help me understand myself." "Seeing you." Bai Changchun shook his head slightly and said, "What a pity. The person who can help me understand is not you. You don't even know what level your cultivation has reached." Wen Lanfeng laughed and said, "I understand now. You mean that I'm still not your opponent?" Bai Changchun said, "It doesn't matter whether you're my opponent or not. The most important thing is that you must remember one thing." "What thing?" Wen Lanfeng asked. "Cultivators above the soul formation stage who trespasses the demon domain will die," Bai Changchun said lightly. "Huh." Wen Lanfeng laughed and waved his hand. A cold light flashed out of his storage bag and a wide long sword appeared in front of him. The blade was as wide as a palm, and there was a flowing mercury-like luster on its surface. Wen Lanfeng gently grabbed the hilt and said, "My giant silver sword failed to force your sword out, and it has been sealed until now. If you can force my sword out, I'll spare your life," Bai Changchun said quietly. "Huh." Wen Lanfeng laughed wildly and said, "Bai Changchun, you're too conceited. Today, unless you're an immortal from the upper realm, I'll make you understand the bottom line of your cultivation level." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, there were thousands of Wen Lanfeng and thousands of giant silver swords in the air, standing above Bai Changchun's head. It was impossible to tell which one was real and which one was fake. The surrounding airflow was dead silent. On Obedient Island, Nongzhu and elder ancestor of Nanming looked at each other. The two women were stunned. They had seen people who could create many phantoms, but at this time the thousands of Wen Lanfeng in the air were motionless as if they were real bodies. They moved. One of the thousands of Wen Lanfeng moved, and with a dazzling silver light, it drew a gorgeous and charming arc. From top to bottom, the sword came from the west, fast as lightning, and slashed toward Bai Changchun's head. Just as the sword was about to touch Bai Changchun, A third hand seemed to grow out of Bai Chongqun's body, and his fingers were like picking flowers. Chapter 508. With a ding sound, it hit the side of the sword's edge and the man and the sword disappeared without a trace. It was just a soft and crisp sound, without any great power that could shake people's hearts. Not even the sound of wind could be heard. However, it made people feel that everything in that space was still except for the two people fighting. The sound, light, and airflow gave people a feeling that they had been frozen. Hibiscus's cultivation was too low, so she couldn't see any clues. She was already dumbfounded when she saw the thousands of Wen Lanfeng's incarnations. Ziyi opened her mouth. According to her understanding, there could only be one real Wen Lanfeng among the thousands of incarnations, and the others were all phantoms. But how could phantoms turn into a tangible form and carry out a substantial attack? Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming understood that this seemingly peaceful place was extremely dangerous. The two of them restrained all of their great power and didn't waste any of it. All of their power was gathered between the sword and the finger. There were not many people in this world who could withstand this sword and finger. They moved again. A sword came from the south, followed by a sword from the east, and then from the north, south, east and west. When Lanfeng's attacks were as dense as rain, one man and one sword were like flying immortals from the heavens, leaving behind a shadow. They abandoned all magnificence and only pursued a simple fatal blow. One man and one sword, only one sword without any extra movements. One man and one sword's fatal blow was simple and unadorned, but when thousands of people and one sword's fatal blows fused together, it formed the most gorgeous visual shock. Thousands of Wen Lanfeng, thousands of huge silver swords and thousands of silver electric shadows interweaved in the air to form a huge, gorgeous silver lotus in full bloom. Thousands of attacks in the end, all focused on the flower's stem, and Bai Chongqun was the white lotus stem that suffered the storm-like attacks. What a beautiful, blooming white lotus! Hibiscus was stunned. She never thought that cultivators could fight in this way. Ziyi was stunned. It was too spectacular. This was the fight between the world's #1 expert and the world's #2 expert. Lady Mu was afraid that the torturer couldn't withstand such an attack. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming stared at their every move without blinking their eyes. Bai Chongqun's expression was calm. With his hands behind his back, he remained motionless like a mountain, withstanding the thousands of attacks in the sky. Thousands of arms also appeared on his shoulders, making him look like the thousand-armed Guanyin. It was extremely beautiful. Ding ding ding. A series of rapid and crisp sounds rang out. Every finger would hit its target, and every single one of them was able to thwart the sharpness of the giant silver sword. With a flick of his finger, Wen Lanfeng's body and sword unity collapsed. In the blink of an eye, the silver lotus gradually dissipated in the air. It was a magnificent opening, but a depressing curtain call. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanmian heaved a sigh of relief. If Wen Lanfeng's 1,000 swords unite was used on them, they would not be able to withstand 100 swords if they did not escape, let alone 1,000 swords. It seemed that only a person with an abnormally high cultivation like Bai Chongqun could remain still like a mountain and deal with it with ease. Moreover, he didn't even draw his weapon and merely flicked his finger lightly to break Wen Lanfeng's 1,000 swords as one. His finger avoided the sharpness and flicked the side of the sword tip. It would be fine if it was just one or two, but it happened that thousands of swords burst out almost at the same time. There was probably no one in the world who could compare to him in terms of eyesight. Although the two were relieved, they knew that this was just the beginning of the warm-up and the real fight was yet to come. Bai Chongqun is indeed Bai Chongqun. I can't believe that my 1,000 swords unite couldn't even force you to move a step. Wen Lanfeng's sigh sounded around, but only his voice could be heard. I don't have time to chat with you. If you don't make a move, I will. Bai Chongqun said calmly. Good. Then come on. Let me experience the power of the world's #1 master again. Wen Lanfeng's voice was still heard, but no one else could be seen. You overestimate yourself. Bai Chongqun snorted coldly. His figure flickered and he also disappeared. The few people on the island looked around but found nothing. Suddenly, a series of rapid bangs sounded high up in the sky. They quickly looked up, and when the last bang sounded, they saw Bai Chongqun and Wen Lanfeng appear above at the same time. The two had obviously fought several times in a race of speed. Otherwise, there would have been no sound for no reason. The two were so fast that the people below couldn't see them clearly. Puff. A muffled groan sounded in the air. Wen Lanfeng's figure seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. He fell like a meteor and quickly fell to the surface of the 1,000-mile lake. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming exchanged a surprised look. They could see that Wen Lanfeng was injured, but they didn't know what Bai Changchun had done to him. Whoosh! Bai Changchun's figure appeared intermittently from high up in the sky. This was not teleportation but a pure speed pursuit. He chased after Wen Lanfeng. At their level of cultivation, it was impossible to cause effective damage to their opponents from afar. They needed to hit them head-on. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming's hearts were in their throats. Although Bai Changchun had injured Wen Lanfeng, he obviously didn't want to let Wen Lanfeng go and was chasing him. Sword without an arrow. Wen Lanfeng, who was falling rapidly, shouted and stopped in the air due to the strong inertia. The strong wind brought by his fall pressed a huge arc of deep whirlpool on the surface of the lake that was only a few dozen meters away from him. As the deep whirlpool bounced up, Wen Lanfeng, who had stopped, also bounced up and roared into the sky. The sword in his hand produced a giant sword aura that was more than 20 meters long. It stirred up huge chaotic sword shadows, like messy transparent thorns shooting through the air, madly stabbing at Bai Changchun who was chasing after him. The two powerhouses brazenly confronted each other head-on. However, Bai Changchun seemed to have fallen into a pile of crystal-clear thorns. Clang clang clang. The fight directly entered a white-hot stage. This was the last scene that the women in purple clothes saw clearly. Then the figures of the two peerless powerhouses became blurred again. With the cultivation of the three women, they could no longer see clearly. They could only see the messy and terrifying sword aura sweeping everywhere. Bang bang. The sound of banging was endless. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming's eyes almost narrowed into slits. They stared at the two people fighting with sparkling eyes. They knew that Bai Changchun did not want to destroy his territory, so he deliberately suppressed his destructive aura. Wen Lanfeng was not here to cause trouble. At the same time, in order not to show weakness, he also suppressed his destructive aura. Otherwise, with such a crazy fight between the two people, the power emitted was earth-shattering, and the shocking and terrifying shock wave alone could completely destroy Obedient Island. They could not just stand on the island and watch the show as if nothing had happened. Wen Lanfeng's cultivation has really improved by leaps and bounds. In the past, it would be impossible for him to fight against old Bai so valiantly. How strong! Nongzhu exclaimed. Ancestor Nanming glanced at him, knowing that he had seen the battle 100 years ago. His gaze returned to the two people fighting. The more Wen Lanfeng fought, the stronger his fighting spirit became. The defeat 100 years ago was so sullen that he almost did not have the strength to fight back and was beaten half to death. He had never had the opportunity to fight with an expert like Bai Changchun so happily. With the giant silver in hand, the sword moved with his heart. His entire body and mind were completely integrated with the sword, achieving the true unity of man and sword that he dreamed of. The sword was him and he was the sword. With the unity of man and sword, he was invincible. Fighting against the world's #1 expert, his fighting spirit and heroic spirit soared to the sky. Wen Lanfeng was secretly amazed. It was a great blessing to be able to fight with an expert like Bai Changchun. It directly stimulated his potential. The shackles between man and sword were broken in an instant. The sword in his hand burst forth with infinite possibilities at will. I don't believe I can't force you to use your sword. Wen Lanfeng's fighting spirit soared. He exerted force again and trapped Bai Changchun in a net of sword gang. The two fighting figures became more and more blurred, and even the huge sword gang was flickering. The sky and the earth were suddenly, up and down, left and right, and loud noises were constantly heard. Hiss! Ancestor Nanming felt a toothache and his eyes were almost blurred. He gasped and rubbed his face with both hands. He said excitedly, "This trip is not in vain, not in vain. Wen Lanfeng is really amazing. He can actually fight with Bai Changchun to this extent." Nongzhu rubbed her blurred eyes and said suspiciously, "Why do I feel that something is wrong?" She then turned around and asked, "Nanming, if I remember correctly, the giant silver in Wen Lanfeng's hand should be a middle-grade spiritual treasure. Do you think a middle-grade spiritual treasure sword can trap Bai Changchun?" He and Bai Changchun were good friends. He knew that Bai Changchun once had a middle-grade spiritual treasure sword, but it collapsed because it could not withstand his strong cultivation. In other words, A middle-grade spiritual treasure could not withstand Bai Chongqun's power at all. But how could he be trapped by a middle-grade spiritual treasure sword? Ancestor Nanming was slightly stunned. He happened to hear Bai Chongqun mention this before. Now that he thought about it, it was indeed not right. He said in a muffled voice, "Maybe when Lanfeng's cultivation is profound, and he can exert the power of the giant silver sword to a higher level?" Nongzhu shook her head slightly, feeling that this explanation was still a bit unreliable. From the fight just now when Lanfeng was injured by Bai Chongqun, it could be seen that the former was obviously not a match for the latter, and the gap was not just a little bit. It was a bit of a joke to think that such a gap could trap the opponent with just the sword gang. Nongzhu murmured, holding her chin. What is old Bai doing? Is he deliberately letting him win? It was not that he was letting Wen Lanfeng win, but Bai Chongqun was getting more and more excited as the fight went on. He did not want to defeat Wen Lanfeng so quickly. He had fought countless times in the cultivation world and he had seen all kinds of opponents. However, just now he suddenly found that Wen Lanfeng seemed to have understood something. Facing the sword moves that he was barely supporting, Wen Lanfeng suddenly became at ease. This fellow actually broke through another shackle in this life and death struggle. And he immediately integrated it seamlessly. Bai Chongqun secretly marveled that this guy was really a rare genius in the world. No wonder his cultivation could advance by leaps and bounds in just 100 years of closed-door training. What a pity. If he was not so infatuated, his achievements in the future would be limitless. Chapter 509. Bai Chongqun shuttled through the sword energy like a phantom, looking forward to another surprise from Wen Lanfeng. However, after a long while, Wen Lanfeng only pressed harder and harder. The surprise he expected did not appear again. Bai Chongqun sighed inwardly. It had been a long time since he met an opponent who could satisfy him. It seemed that his expectations were a little too high. With his disappointment, Wen Lanfeng suddenly felt that he could not bear it. Wen Lanfeng sadly realized that he had overestimated himself. Bai Chongqun kept dodging not because he was forced to the point that he had no time to make a move, but because he had not made a move all along. It seemed that he was waiting for Wen Lanfeng to unleash his greatest potential. Perhaps he saw that Wen Lanfeng was only this good, so he lost interest in dawdling and began to counterattack. Bai Chongqun's hands, which were originally behind his back, stretched out one of them and drew an ethereal and unfathomable shadow. Plang, plang. The sword energy that was like a wild forest could no longer be freely wielded. Bai Chongqun shuttled back and forth as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. From time to time, his two fingers would point at the smooth side of the sword energy that swept past, making a series of clanging sounds. Wen Lanfeng suddenly felt his arms go numb. The sword energy that he wielded seemed to have encountered a heavy resistance, and its speed gradually slowed down. The two people who were originally so fast that they were like blurry shadows, gradually revealed their true bodies in the air. Even the women in purple could see their every move. Oh no! Nongzhu and Ancestor Nanming exclaimed in unison. They could finally be sure that Bai Chongqun had been holding back just now. Once he made a move, Wen Lanfeng would not be able to resist. Not to mention Nongzhu, even Ancestor Nanming knew Bai Chongqun's temper more or less. Since this guy had decided to go all out, Wen Lanfeng would probably be in danger. Just as Nongzhu and Ancestor Nanming were on tenterhooks, a shocking scene appeared. The huge sword energy was no longer entangled with Bai Chongqun and was retracted. Even though Bai Chongqun was just casually pointing here and there, Wen Lanfeng really felt that she couldn't take it anymore. If she continued to waste time, she would definitely be exhausted. Wen Lanfeng retracted the huge sword and held the hilt with both hands. With a ah sound, he quickly slashed at Bai Chongqun, giving him a solid blow. The speed and power of this sword naturally didn't need to be said. It had already brought with it the rumbling sound of wind and thunder. Bai Chongqun stood quietly in the air, not dodging or evading. The others were shocked. Humph. He let out a cold snort that sounded like a vajra subduing a demon. His tone was full of extreme disdain. This cold snort was simply a great humiliation to Wen Lanfeng. Wen Lanfeng was filled with grief and indignation, but he had nowhere to vent it. He immediately exerted all his cultivation and infused it into the sword that he slashed out, determined to succeed in one strike. The huge energy sword that howled like thunder launched a thunderous strike with the force to split the heavens and earth. Just as the sword was about to reach his head, Bai Chongqun stretched out his hand again. No one saw when he stretched out his hand. The howling came to an abrupt halt. The huge energy sword did not move. It was not moving, but it could not move. Bai Changchun stretched out 2 fingers and firmly clamped down on the blade, causing Wen Lanfeng's all-out strike to be unable to advance even half a step further. His thunderous rage was quelled with just a lift of his hand, when Lanfeng pressed on the sword with both hands. His face was red from holding back. Bai Changchun was dressed in a light green robe. His thin face was expressionless. He had one hand behind his back while the other hand clamped down on the huge blade with 2 fingers. This was the scene in the air. It was obvious who was stronger and who was weaker at a glance. The spectators did not even dare to breathe loudly. This scene was deeply imprinted in their minds. Hibiscus's mouth was so wide that an egg could be stuffed in it. Her mind was completely blank. Xi crossed her hands in front of her chest. Her eyes were filled with little stars. As expected of Senior Bai, who I've admired since childhood. He's too perfect. Lady Mu bowed slightly in respect. The demon region's torturer was naturally invincible. Otherwise, how could he intimidate thousands of demon kings and the ghost king, Nongzhu and patriarch Nanming swallowed with difficulty? How many people in the world could block Wen Lanfeng's thunderous strike, let alone Bai Changchun's freakish move? He actually used his fingers to clamp it. It was indescribable. It was a blatant act of contempt. With extreme disdain, he stretched out 2 fingers. The expression on Wen Lanfeng's face could only be described as infinite grief and indignation. He had gathered all his cultivation into the sword, but it was stopped by the opponent's 2 fingers. The previous fight was like a cat toying with a mouse. This was 100 times worse than the humiliation he had suffered 100 years ago. He had come confidently as soon as he came out of seclusion. It turned out that it was just a self-made joke, the biggest joke in the world. Do you still think you're qualified for me to use my sword now? Bai Changchun asked indifferently with the sword in one hand. I've lost. When Lanfeng spat out those 3 words with difficulty. Didn't you want to test the bottom line of my cultivation? Why did you admit defeat so quickly? Bai Changchun continued to ask mercilessly. Do you remember what I said? What? When Lanfeng asked blankly. Cultivators above the soul formation stage who trespasses into the demon region must die. Bai Changchun reminded in a cold tone. When Lanfeng's pupils shrank. Nongzhu was shocked and said, Old Bai, don't be impulsive. Let's talk. However, how could the current Bai Changchun listen to advice? Humph. Another cold snort that sounded like Vajra subduing demons rang out. Without the slightest hesitation, the hand holding the sword pushed forward at lightning speed. When Lanfeng felt a majestic and unparalleled momentum coming from the sword. He could no longer hold the sword with both hands. Bang! The sword hilt hit his abdomen and the fierce qi went straight to his limbs and bones. Puff! He could not hold back a mouthful of blood. Old Bai, stop! Nongzhu shouted wildly. The others were shocked, speechless. The world's #1 expert was going to kill someone. Bai Changchun twisted the 2 fingers that held the sword. The giant silver sword that had escaped from Wen Lanfeng's hand returned to its original shape. It flipped in the air and bounced in the direction of Shuntian Island. Whoosh! Bai Changchun was still in his original position in the air, but another Bai Changchun suddenly appeared in front of Wen Lanfeng. Wen Lanfeng was shocked. Teleportation was useless when he was locked on by such an expert's qi. He quickly covered his body with protective vigor energy. Bai Changchun pointed out 2 more times. The 2 small fingers contained a tremendous force. With a bang, Wen Lanfeng's protective astral energy was shattered. He was sent flying and with a pu sound he spat out another mouthful of blood. Wen Lanfeng had just flown back a dozen meters when Bai Changchun, who had been chasing him all the way, arrived in front of him again. There was already a third Bai Changchun in the air. Wen Lanfeng struggled on his deathbed. He concentrated all his cultivation into a palm strike. At this time, Wen Lanfeng was already seriously injured and no longer had the ability to control the residual power of his battle. With this palm strike, the wild momentum rushed out like a stormy sea. Oh no! Ancestor Nanming exclaimed. A golden light flashed out of the storage bag and quickly spread into the sky. The entire obedient island was enshrouded in a golden net. The surging shockwave was blocked by this fine golden net. Shuntian Island was safe and sound. However, the waves on this side of the 1,000-mile lake rose and fell. How could Bai Chongqun care about Wen Lanfeng's palm strike? He clenched his fingers into a fist and brazenly punched Wen Lanfeng's palm. Wen Lanfeng spat out another mouthful of blood. His face was pale and he was sent flying again. The fourth Bai Chongqun appeared like the god of death. The three phantoms behind him had not dissipated. One could imagine how fast he was. Then he clenched his fist into a palm and slapped Wen Lanfeng's chest. Wen Lanfeng smiled bitterly. After suffering 3 consecutive lightning strikes from the sword hilt, a finger and a fist, his body was extremely weak. Especially the last punch, which had scattered the vital essence in his body. He had no ability to resist and could only wait for death. In fact, in this world, how many people could withstand Bai Chongqun's 3 lightning strikes? Only Wen Lanfeng with his profound cultivation could withstand it. If it were anyone else, they would have been dead. Wen Lanfeng's bitter smile hid a trace of relief. It was not an injustice to die in the hands of the world's #1 expert. When he saw Bai Chongqun's cold and handsome face approaching, he recalled the woman with unparalleled beauty in Spirit Fong Valley. Will you occasionally think of me after I die? Farewell, my most beloved woman. What I regret the most in my life is that I couldn't see you again before coming here. 2 drops of crystal-clear liquid gushed out of the corners of Wen Lanfeng's eyes. He actually thought of Lu Yanqing before he died. Nanming, I'll *CK your ancestors. Nongzhu climbed the golden net and howled at the sky. His hands that were holding the net were already bloody. He had already prepared to teleport in front of Wen Lanfeng at the critical moment. He believed that Bai Chongqun would not kill him. As long as he had a chance, he was not afraid of not being able to save Wen Lanfeng. He remembered that he had saved Wen Lanfeng in the past. Who would have thought that no matter how much he calculated, he would actually miss the golden net that Nanming ancestor had set up to block the impact wave. Just as Bai Chongqun punched, he teleported over, but unexpectedly he was blocked by this treasure. This treasure was an upper-grade defensive spiritual treasure refined by ancestor Nanming for his own use. Even a spiritual treasure of the same level would not be able to break it. Nongzhu wanted to tear it apart with his bare hands. With his cultivation, it was simply a dream. Master! Z exclaimed. She had never seen her master so sad before. Furong and Lady Mu were even more confused. Ancestor Nanming was completely dumbfounded. He naturally knew what Nongzhu wanted to do, but he had ruined it. A series of events happened in an instant. Everything was unpredictable. Nongzhu helplessly howled while climbing the golden net. Now no one could stop Bai Chongqun. No one could stop him. No, there was one more person, maybe he could. In a flash, the 3 words Yu Qianchou suddenly appeared in his mind. Bai Chongqun's precious disciple. This was his last hope. No matter what, he had to try. Nongzhu impatiently shouted, Yu Qianchou, stop. For Yu Qianchou, old Bai, for Yu Qianchou, you can't kill him. Stop, stop. It had to be said that this sentence really stopped Bai Chongqun from slapping down. At the last critical moment, the 3 words Yu Qianchou made Bai Chongqun's hand pause, and the following words made him completely stop. Although it was said to be slow, it actually happened very quickly. Everything happened almost in an instant. The 3 shadows behind Bai Chongqun gradually disappeared. He stopped his hand and stood quietly in the air, letting Wen Lanfeng fall into the 1,000-mile lake. Bai Chongqun coldly glanced at Nongzhu, who was crawling on the golden net like a crab, as if asking what he meant. Before Wen Lanfeng fell into the lake, he opened his eyes, which were full of disbelief. He also heard Nongzhu's words. He didn't expect that the name Yu Qianchou could save him from death. The cold lake water drowned him and he had no strength to control himself. Bai Chongqun's 3 strikes were too powerful. Not only did they scatter the real vitality in his body, but his bones and meridians were also injured. If that palm hit him again, he wouldn't have the slightest ability to resist, and his body would have been torn into pieces. The greenish-blue lake water was stained with blood from his floating body, and it spread out in strands. Nongzhu's eyes were wide open. With a cheer, he jumped down from the golden net, seemingly crazy and lively. Ouch! Oh my god! Ancestor Nanming sighed helplessly and finally felt relieved. Who knew that this sound would attract trouble? Bastard! Nongzhu roared angrily. She jumped over and grabbed his collar, punching and kicking him hard. Ancestor Nanming cried out in pain, but he didn't dare to fight back. After all, he was the one in the wrong. Son of AB*, have you had enough? Ancestor Nanming roared and pushed him away. Damn it! Aren't you going to retract your stupid net? Do you want Wen Lanfeng to drown instead of being beaten to death? Nongzhu roared. Ancestor Nanming's anger was instantly extinguished. Why are you still in a daze? I'll beat you to death, you bastard. Nongzhu rushed over and beat him up again. The girls were all dumbfounded. They didn't expect that a soul formation expert was also human, though he had such a human side. I was wrong. Stop hitting me, let me retract the net. Ancestor Nanming crawled out from under Nongzhu's punches and kicks, his face covered with bloody fingerprints from when Nongzhu pulled the golden net. Ancestor Nanming cast a spell, and the golden net returned to the sky above Obedient Island with a whoosh. It shrunk into a ball, turned into a golden light and shot into his storage bag. Nongzhu didn't have time to argue with him. In an instant she appeared below Bai Chongqun, looked up and smiled foolishly at him. Then he leaped to the lake surface and grabbed Wen Lanfeng, who was smiling foolishly at him. Seeing this, he raised his hand and gave Wen Lanfeng 2 big slaps. Then he picked him up and quickly flew to Obedient Island. As soon as he put him down, the others also came over. It's good that you're not dead, or I'll feel guilty for the rest of my life, Ancestor Nanming said with relief. He pressed his palm gently on Wen Lanfeng's chest to check his injuries. After a moment of silence, he exhaled and said, Your true vitality has dissipated and your meridians and bones are all injured. Fortunately, you have a good foundation. If it were someone else, I'm afraid they wouldn't have been able to withstand it. Think of a way to recover. Wen Lanfeng was secretly glad to be able to survive the disaster. Looking at the bloody fingerprints on Ancestor Nanming's face, he smiled knowingly. As a result, Nongzhu grabbed him again and gave him 2 more big slaps, scolding, smiling foolishly? What are you smiling for? You're happy that I didn't beat you to death, aren't you? You're not King dead, but I have to clean up your mess. Damn it. If I knew this earlier, I would have let you die freely. Chapter 510. These 2 slaps gave the group of people a fright. Ziyi opened her mouth. It was the first time she saw how brave her master was. This was Wen Lanfeng, the second expert in the world. Yet her master dared to slap him. How many people in the world would dare to do this? Ancestor Nanming touched his face subconsciously. This guy was crazy. He even dared to slap Wen Lanfeng. It seemed that he was not wronged. Although Wen Lanfeng did not have the strength to move, he was still sober. It was okay to slap him twice before, but why did he slap him twice now? Did he really think that his face could be slapped so casually? Wen Lanfeng immediately glared at him. What are you looking at? Are you not convinced? Stand up and slap back. Aren't you very powerful? Why, are you a bear now? Nongzhu sneered at him. Seeing that he was not convinced, she immediately raised her hand again and shouted, Do you believe that I will give you 2 more slaps? Less. Enough. Ancestor Nanming hurriedly hugged his arm. Wen Lanfeng was not a toy. How could he let him slap him casually? He had slapped him and scolded him. Nongzhu's anger had dissipated a lot. Regardless of whether Wen Lanfeng was willing or not, he lifted him up and helped him to sit cross-legged. He slapped his back and injected his vital energy into his body, helping him guide the dissipated vital energy back to his meridians. With Wen Lanfeng's cultivation, as long as he converged his vital energy, he should be able to recover quickly. The group of people stood on the side and looked at each other. They finally understood what it meant to slap and scold each other for love. Bai Chongqun teleported back to the island. He glanced around coldly and pointed at Furong, saying, Follow me. Then he slowly walked toward the big house in the center of the island. Hibiscus was immediately at a loss of what to do and didn't know what to do. Nongzhu, who was helping Wen Lanfeng guide his vital energy back, opened one eye and looked. Suddenly she stopped and stood up. She said to Ancestor Nanming, Come, I will take this girl. Ancestor Nanming nodded and sat behind Wen Lanfeng. Nongzhu waved to Furong, and the 2 entered the big house one after another. After entering, Bai Chongqun still had that cold look in his eyes. Furong stood there uneasily, not knowing what to do. Nongzhu pointed at Bai Chongqun and said, Hurry up and greet him. This is Yu Qianzhou's master, the person your man asked me to bring you here. Furong walked over while trembling with fear. She knelt down and kowtowed, Junior, Furong greets Senior. As soon as she knelt down, she didn't dare to get up. The scene of the battle had been carved into her heart. She hadn't expected Yu Qianzhou's master to be so powerful. Her heart was thumping non-stop and she was extremely nervous. Even Bai Changchun and Nongzhu could hear her heartbeat. Only when Bai Changchun asked her to get up did she stand up timidly. Seeing her lower her head as if she had done something wrong, Bai Changchun said indifferently, "Raise your head and look at me." Furong didn't dare to be disobedient. She hurriedly raised her head, but her eyes were a bit disobedient. She didn't dare to look straight at him and she frantically avoided Bai Changchun's gaze. Bai Changchun stared at her eyes. Although she was flustered, her eyes were clear and pure. She wasn't a woman with messy thoughts. This was especially obvious on Furong. Looking at her eyebrows, it was obvious that she had lost her virginity. "You're Yu Qianchou's woman?" Bai Changchun's expression and tone had eased a lot. "Yes." Furong didn't allow others to question her. "When did you and Yu Qianchou meet? Where did you meet? Why are you together?" Bai Changchun kept asking questions. Nongzhu looked at him in a daze as if she didn't know him. Then she stood aside and pinched her chin, smiling inwardly. This scene was a bit like an ugly daughter-in-law meeting her parents-in-law in the secular world. Hibiscus naturally didn't dare to conceal anything. Apart from some of the things that Yu Qianchou had told her, everything else was poured out like beans from a bamboo tube. She spilled everything. After that, Bai Changchun let her go out. He coldly looked at Nongzhu and snorted, "Tell me, what does it have to do with Yu Qianchou to kill Wen Lanfeng or not? If you can't give me a satisfactory reason, Wen Lanfeng is still a dead man. It's useless for you to stop me. You can't do it again and again." Nongzhu's expression twitched. It seemed that if she didn't make up a satisfactory reason, Wen Lanfeng couldn't escape today. She smiled bitterly and said, "Old Bai, why do you do this? The cultivation world is full of deceit. It's not easy to find a few true friends. Although Wen Lanfeng is a little too infatuated, he's still a good friend. Why do you want to kill him?" "This is not the reason I want to hear," Bai Changchun said indifferently. "What a heartless guy." Nongzhu muttered and then said seriously, "I don't want you to kill him. Of course I'm selfish as a friend, but at the same time, it's also for the good of Yu Qianchou. Think about it. Yu Qianchou is in danger when he travels among countries. If Wen Lanfeng helps him when he needs it, he'll be much safer, won't he?" Bai Changchun glanced at her coldly and snorted, "You mean without Wen Lanfeng's protection Yu Qianchou won't be safe? Yes, you're powerful. As long as you show up, no one in the world will dare to touch your disciple." Nongzhu touched her forehead and said helplessly, "What will happen after you go to the Holy East Land? Do you think those old guys will be content with their place? Do you think Yu Qianchou can control the demon region with his current cultivation? Even if I do my best to help, Yu Qianchou and I can't stop those people's ambitions. But with Wen Lanfeng it's different. You've seen his current strength. Except for you, no one in the world is his opponent. If Yu Qianchou is in trouble, I don't dare to say for others, but I'm confident I can get Wen Lanfeng's help. You know, he's not a bad person." Bai Changchun was silent for a long time. His eyes were flickering. Later he slowly closed his eyes and said no more. Nongzhu was secretly relieved. She finally convinced this old guy. At the same time, she admired herself for coming up with such a good reason. It seemed that she had been with Yu Qianchou for too long and learned bad things. In the palace of Daoist Kingdom, the winner of the lively martial arts competition was finally decided. As expected, Zhang Ping relied on his powerful skills to defeat all his opponents. No one was a match for him. Because of his extraordinary skills, people suspected that he was a cultivator. However, after the secret appraisal of several consecrators in the palace, he was indeed an ordinary person, not a cultivator. In the end, Zhang Ping did not know whether to laugh or cry as he accepted the crown of first place. Wen Yuan and Wen Bai of Baiwan Kingdom also did not know whether to laugh or cry. Yu Qianchou had casually thrown out his follower and unexpectedly won the first place. Wen Bai also could not see that Zhang Ping was a cultivator. What made the two depressed was that Zhang Ping was a citizen of Baiwan. If he really became the son-in-law of Daoist Kingdom, the fabricated background that he had previously registered would be exposed. They had to find a way to cover up his lie when they returned. On the same day, the Emperor of Daoist Kingdom, Zhao Heng, decided to host a banquet to entertain the diligent talents of various countries. At night, the palace of Daoist Kingdom was brightly lit. People sang and danced, immersed in a festive atmosphere. The top 20 winners of the competition received the honor of sitting in front of the emperor. Zhang Peng was naturally among them. He could be said to be the most lively one. People constantly came over to toast and congratulate this prospective son-in-law. Zhang Peng's face was constantly twitching. In the eyes of others, they thought that he was overjoyed. The lights were waning and people were singing and dancing. It was a scene of wealth and honor. Zhang Peng did not know how much wine he had drunk to drown his sorrows. He felt like he wanted to make himself drunk. At this moment, a palace maid suddenly came behind him and whispered in his ear, "The princess has ordered this servant to take young master to the West Palace for a while. Young master, please follow me." Zhang Peng was stunned when he heard this. He looked at the palace maid and thought to himself, could it be that I haven't officially married into the family, and that slut can't help but want to secretly have a rendezvous with me? I want to see what that slut wants to do. He was not afraid. He immediately got up and quietly left the banquet with the palace maid. The Emperor Zhao Heng glanced at them and immediately recognized that the palace maid was his daughter's maid. He looked at the chief eunuch beside him and helplessly shook his head with a wry smile. The palace was deep and there were guards everywhere. The palace maid held a golden token and led Zhang Peng without any obstruction. Zhang Peng was also worried that there was something fishy going on, so he memorized the surrounding terrain along the way. After entering a large courtyard, there was a faint fragrance. Obviously, they had arrived at the residence of a woman. The palace maid led him to a brightly lit room. Before entering the room, Zhang Peng looked up at the plaque above the door. The words Liu Xianxia were written in gold. As soon as he entered the room, he smelled the lingering fragrance of incense. In front of him were 3 women dressed in dignified white palace gowns. They were either standing or sitting and their eyes were all fixed on him. The palace maid stepped forward and handed the golden token to the youngest of the 3. Zhang Peng understood that this woman was most likely the princess. Xianxia took the golden token and waved her hand to dismiss the maid. "Send word that no matter what they hear, no one is allowed to come in without my permission." "Yes." The palace maid received the order and retreated. With a schwa sound, the door was tightly shut. Zhang Peng suddenly turned his head to look, and his heart secretly became vigilant. The other 2 women unscrupulously surrounded Zhang Peng and circled around him, sizing him up. The 3 people in the room were the 3 daughters of the Daong Kingdom's emperor, Zhao Heng. After the eldest Zhao Rongxiang saw him, she covered her mouth and smiled at the second Zhao Hanxiang. "He is a strong and burly man." Zhao Hanxiang nodded and smiled. "Third sister, you got lucky." The third Zhao Qinxiang's face was as cold as ice, and there was not a trace of a smile. She suddenly shouted, "Zhang Peng, why don't you kneel and greet this princess?" The eldest and second Zhao Qinxiang smacked their lips. Third sister was establishing her might. They could not laugh anymore and quickly retreated. "Humph." Zhang Peng coldly snorted and said without moving, "I am not a subject of the Daong Kingdom. Why should I kneel to you? You have become my Daong Kingdom's consort. Naturally you are a subject of the Daong Kingdom." Zhao Qinxiang sternly said. "I haven't done it yet, right?" Zhang Peng sneered. "It is not too late to talk about it after I have done it." "How dare you?" Zhao Qinxiang shouted. Her figure shot up with a whoosh, rushing towards Zhang Peng. Under her dazzling white palace dress she kicked out a pair of legs. With a series of kicks she sent a strong gust of wind straight towards Zhang Peng's head. This skinny woman knew kung fu. Zhang Peng was slightly startled. His figure swayed left and right and he quickly dodged. "Hey!" Zhao Qinxiang's consecutive kicks missed. When she leaped over his head she swung her leg backwards and swept across the back of his head. Every move was ruthless and aimed at his vital parts. Zhang Peng was slightly annoyed. In this palace it was not good to fight back against a princess, but this woman was going too far. Immediately he blocked it with his palm and chopped down on her ankle, blocking that leg. Although he did not use much strength, when Zhao Qinxiang landed on the ground, a trace of pain flashed across her face. However, she clenched her teeth and resisted. Then she bent down and swept her leg. Zhang Peng could not help but laugh. Even if he was not a cultivator with his martial arts, how could she sweep him down? Thus he pressed down on his lower body and simply stood there, letting her sweep him. Pa! When the 2 legs collided, Zhao Qinxiang could not help but let out a weak groan of pain. Zhang Peng originally thought that she would understand how powerful he was by now. Who would have thought that she would pull back her leg, press down and spring at him again? Her 10 fingers formed into sharp claws, and without the slightest bit of politeness, she clawed wildly as if she wanted to ruin Zhang Peng's face. Although she was not afraid of being injured, she was wearing a mask. Once she clawed at him, she would definitely be exposed. Zhang Peng coldly snorted. This time he did not hold back. His figure flashed, and with a swing of his palm, he slapped her lower abdomen and directly threw her back onto the soft couch. The speed of the flash was extremely fast, and in the eyes of the two women, it was just a flash of a shadow. The two of them revealed expressions of surprise. This Zhang Peng was very powerful. No wonder he could win first place in the martial arts competition. Zhang Peng, how dare you attack the princess? The eldest sister Zhao Rongxiang shouted. Zhang Peng ignored her and stared at Zhao Qianxiang, asking, Princess, I don't know how I have offended you, but you want to kill me? Zhao Qianxiang covered her lower abdomen with her hand, gritted her teeth and said, I'll let you know what it means to be obedient. I'll let you know the consequences of not listening to this princess. After saying that, she rolled over and opened a long wooden box on the couch. 3 long swords with silver scabbards were grabbed and thrown out. Zhao Rongxiang and Zhao Hanxiang caught the swords and looked at each other. Zhao Qianxiang jumped off the couch with a sword in her hand and shouted, Eldest sister, second sister, set up a sword formation and teach him a lesson about the rules. Clang, clang, clang. The 3 swords were unsheathed. The 3 women flew like butterflies and their swords intertwined with each other. Zhang Peng was speechless. How could all the daughters of the imperial family know martial arts? How did the emperor teach his daughters? As he dodged, he discovered that the youngest and unruly princess was the most vicious. The tip of her sword was actually aimed at his genitals several times. This thoroughly infuriated Zhang Peng. With a speed that was inconceivably fast for the 3 women, he flicked his fingers and easily seized the swords in the 3 women's hands. The 3 women stared at their empty hands in shock. Before they could react, they saw a figure flash by. They felt their bodies go numb and they couldn't move. Zhang Peng took the opportunity to seal the acupuncture points of the 3 women, and with a swing of his sword, the swords were nailed to the wooden beam. Don't think that just because you are a princess I don't care about a trifling Daoist kingdom. Zhang Peng arrogantly threw down these words. He wanted to turn around and leave, but he immediately thought of the many guards in the palace. In addition, there were experts from the cultivation world overseeing this place. He really couldn't just barge in. His gaze fell on the gold medal on the small table beside the couch. He spat out the alcohol in his stomach and went over to pick up the gold medal. When he turned around and brushed past the princess, he caught a glimpse of the unruly princess's eyes filled with endless resentment. He was slightly startled and stopped to size up Zhao Qianxiang. He discovered that she was a delicate beauty with a slender waist and an alluring chest. His mind slightly heated up. He didn't know if it was because of the alcohol, but he now remembered his master's words to get the princess to bed as soon as possible. Since master has already said so, how can I not follow? Zhang Peng silently thought. As someone who grew up in a war, he paid particular attention to neatness. He turned around and moved Zhao Rongxiang and Zhao Hanxiang to face the wall. He then picked up Zhao Qianxiang and threw her on the soft couch. Zhao Qianxiang couldn't speak or move. She stared at Zhang Peng in fear, not knowing what he wanted to do. Hiss! Zhang Peng raised his hand and directly tore off her clothes. It seemed that he didn't know what gentleness was, and in a few moments, a white and tender body was revealed. Zhao Rongxiang and Zhao Hanxiang's eyes widened. Zhang Peng didn't notice that opposite them was a bronze mirror used for dressing up. The movement on the couch could be seen in the mirror. The 2 girls saw the man in the bronze mirror take off his clothes and press down heavily. If the 2 girls hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would have never believed that someone dared to humiliate the princess in the palace. Zhao Qianxiang's eyes widened and tears silently flowed. She endured the pain of a broken melon. She never thought that there would be such a daring person, and in the end she fainted from anger. After Zhang Peng was done, he was also slightly shocked. He realized that he was a little too impulsive. He was secretly a little worried. Would something happen? After putting on his clothes, he pulled a brocade quilt to cover the beauty he had defiled. He took the gold medal and left without saying anything else. He really had the demeanor of a general. Just now he was a little flustered, but once he opened the door he regained his composure. He closed the door and showed the gold medal to the palace maids who came over. He said in a deep voice, "The 3 princesses have something to discuss." Without a summon, no one is allowed to enter. The palace maids acknowledged and retreated. He swaggered out with the gold medal and went back the way he came. By the time he returned to the banquet, it was already coming to an end. Just in time for the banquet to end, he quietly followed the crowd and left. Emperor Zhao saw that Zhang Ping came back alone. He didn't even have a guide. How could the palace allow an outsider to trespass? With a suspicious look in his eyes, he signaled the chief eunuch beside him with his eyes. As soon as he left the palace, Zhang Ping quickly found Pingxin Wang Wenyu to say goodbye, saying that he had something to do and would leave first. He also knew that the matter had gotten out of hand. Paper could not contain fire. He found an empty alley and quickly flew into the sky, returning to the small courtyard of the embassy. In the courtyard, Yu Qianzhou and Exin Laosan were drinking under the moonlight and chatting about the cultivation world. Zhang Peng's sudden intrusion almost startled Exin Laosan into making a move. During this time, there were too many people who were eyeing Yu Qianzhou covetously. When he realized that it was Zhang Peng, Exin Laosan was even more shocked. He didn't expect that this guy was actually a cultivator. Zhang Peng, what's wrong? Yu Qianzhou also noticed that there was something wrong with Zhang Peng's expression. Zhang Peng looked at Exin Laosan and stammered, "Sir, can I have a word with you?" Chapter 5:11. Third Lord Exin was unhappy to hear this. It was obvious that Third Lord Exin was trying to avoid him. Yu Qianzhou was startled. This was the first time he saw Zhang Peng like this. He thought that it must be something important. He waved his hand and entered the house with Zhang Peng. As for whether Third Lord Exin was happy or not, it was not his concern. It was not the time to care about Third Lord Exion's mood. Zhang Peng seemed to be afraid that someone would eavesdrop. With his early-stage tribulation passing cultivation, he barely set up a soundproof enchantment. Then he scratched his head, not knowing what to say. Yu Qianzhou looked him up and down and frowned. "What the hell are you doing? If you have something to say, spit it out." "I have something important to do tonight. I don't have time to watch you pretend to be a woman." Zhang Peng gritted his teeth and finally told him everything that had happened. Yu Qianzhou's mouth opened wider and wider as he listened. After a long time, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He gave a thumbs up and said, "I thought I was a bastard enough. I didn't expect you to surpass your master. You actually dared to capture the princess in the palace. You're really not afraid of death. Don't you know that there are 3 old men in the last stage of tribulation passing in the palace? If they find out, they will kill you on the spot. No one will be able to refute it." Zhang Peng lowered his head in shame and muttered, "Master, you were the one who told me to get the princess into bed as soon as possible. *CK your sister. When did I say such a shameful thing?" Yu Qianzhou immediately rolled his eyes. But he couldn't finish his sentence. He remembered that he had indeed said such a thing. "Master, do you remember now?" Zhang Peng asked weakly. "You were the one who did not control your lower body. Now you are blaming Master. How dare you say that? Why did I accept a beast like you as my disciple? Fortunately, I had the foresight to not let you call me master in front of others. Otherwise, I would have lost all my face. I am ashamed." Yu Qianzhou shook his head and sighed. "Master, I know I was wrong." Zhang Peng scratched his head awkwardly. "This can't be hidden for long. They will find out sooner or later. Master, why don't we escape first?" "Come on, I've always been an upright person. When have I ever escaped?" Yu Qianzhou poked his chest and said, "You have to bear the consequences of your own actions. Didn't you get first place in the martial arts competition? Anyway, the princess will be yours sooner or later. It doesn't matter if you try the horse first before fitting the saddle. You might as well stay in Deyang Kingdom and be the prince consort." Zhang Ping panicked. "Master, you can't go back on your word. You said that sleeping with the princess doesn't mean that I have to be the prince consort." "Shut up. I'm warning you, I've never said anything like that. You can't slander your master's character anywhere." Zhang Peng had just been scolded to the point of dejection. He rubbed his chin and muttered, "Damn it. Wasn't it just sleeping with a woman? What's the big deal? If you were a commoner's daughter and you dared to do this, I would cripple you immediately. As for the emperor's daughter, since the emperor has many wives, he must have many daughters as well." Zhang Peng suddenly raised his head and weakly asked, "Master, you mean, don't give me that cowardly look. It's disgusting." Yu Qianzhou glanced at him and coldly said, "So what if she is the emperor's daughter? Do what you have to do. Master is here, what are you afraid of? He then walked out. That's right, that's right. There's nothing in this world that Master can't handle. Zhang Ping suddenly became spirited. The Iron Tower-like man nodded and bowed. He was just short of massaging Zhang Peng's shoulders and back. He removed the soundproof enchantment and quickly followed. In the imperial study of the imperial palace, Zhao Heng was drinking a hangover soup from a eunuch. The head eunuch walked in with a taut face. He gave a look to the eunuch in the room and the eunuch quickly retreated. Zhao Heng looked at him and calmly asked, "What's wrong?" The head eunuch went over and whispered a few words. Zhao Heng could no longer sit still and stood up abruptly. "Pa!" The cup in his hand shattered on the ground. "Preposterous! Preposterous!" Zhao Heng roared madly. He kicked over the imperial table in front of him and strode out. After rushing to the imperial harem and informing the three Mi brothers of the news, they were immediately enraged. Someone actually dared to do that to the princess under their noses. If word got out, wouldn't they become a laughing stock? It was obvious that he didn't care about the three brothers at all. He clearly didn't care about Illumination Peak. Esteemed elders, I know that the Wen clan of Aquamarine Nation has an extraordinary status in the cultivation world, but I really cannot swallow this grievance today. I implore the esteemed elders to uphold justice for me. Zhao Heng cupped his hands in front of his chest and said angrily. He had already made up his mind. If the three masters were not willing to come forward, he would mobilize the army to besiege the Baiwan nation's embassy. Mi Russian said in a low voice, "We watched the third young lady grow up. We will naturally seek justice for her." He turned to the two sides and said, "You two stand guard. I will go to the Baiwan nation's embassy to ask for her." Then he quickly flew away. The group of people from Baiwan nation returned to the embassy in a drunken state and dispersed. Wen Yuan and Wen Bai had just walked into the main hall when they saw Yu Qianchou sitting leisurely in the main hall. Zhang Peng stood silently at the side and third Exon was looking around. Wen Bai walked over and cupped his hands and said, "Mister, is there anything?" His tone was very respectful. Ever since he saw Yu Qianchou's heroism in the battle that day, he could not help but admire him. "Haha. Nothing much." Yu Qianchou stood up and said with a smile, "We have disturbed you for many days. We are here to bid farewell to the two of you." When Yuan and Wen Bai looked at each other worriedly, the latter frowned and said, "Is Zhang Ping also leaving with Mr.?" "Of course. We are also embarrassed to be living and eating for free," Yu Qianchou said with a laugh. "Mister, do you know that Zhang Ping has already won the first place? There will be a ceremony in a few days and he will become the emperor's son-in-law of Daong Nation? If he leaves, how will Baiwan Nation answer to Daong Nation?" Wen Bai said gloomily. "Sigh. I'm afraid he won't be the emperor's son-in-law anymore. This guy has caused some trouble." Yu Qianchou summarized Zhang Peng's scandal with great regret. Wen Bai and Wen Yuan were instantly dumbfounded. Third brother Exon suddenly turned around and stared at Zhang Ping without blinking. He thought to himself, no wonder he came over in a hurry to whisper to me. So this is what happened. What's the difference between this and slapping Hua Zhongming's face? What guts? Originally, I didn't have the face to stay after causing trouble. But after thinking about it, I can't leave without knowing the reason and put the Wen family in a difficult position. So I waited for the two of you to come back and inform you so that you can prepare in advance," Yu Qianchou said helplessly. When Yu Yuan's face was already dark. He was the one who arranged for Zhang Peng's registration. If the two nations became enemies, how would he explain to the monarch when he returned? Wen Bai's expression twitched. "Prepare in advance? How can we prepare in advance? If Mr. takes Zhang Peng away, I'm afraid none of us will be able to leave Baiwan Nation. TSK. As the younger generation of the world's second strongest expert, how can he be so afraid of trouble?" Yu Qianchou shook his head and then asked suspiciously, "Didn't Senior Wen Rui tell you the reason why he is in a hurry to leave?" In fact, he also knew in his heart that Wen Rui had no reason to tell such a big thing like Wen Lanfeng coming out of seclusion. No. Wen Bai shook his head. He wanted to ask but dared not. He was not qualified to inquire about matters of the upper echelons, but he showed an inquiring look. "No wonder." Yu Qianchou said solemnly, "You don't need to be afraid of Dayan Nation looking for trouble because your old ancestor Wen Lanfeng has come out of seclusion." Wen Bai and Wen Yuan were shocked. The pillar of Baiwan nation who had been in seclusion for 100 years had come out. This was such a big thing. No wonder the old high priest was in a hurry to return. That's all I have to say. If they come looking for trouble, you can bring up your old ancestor. They won't dare to not give face to your old ancestor. We'll take our leave first. Yu Qianzhou cupped his hands and called out to Zhang Ping before leaving. He really wanted to leave, but he thought that he should not be too shameless. If he caused trouble for others, he should at least greet them and point them in the right direction. However, he had done too many bad things. Occasionally, a kind thought would delay him. It seemed that it was a little too late for him to leave now. They all paused at the same time. They sensed a divine sense sweep over them. Mi Russian had quietly appeared in the lobby, staring at Zhang Ping like a hawk. Yu Qianzhou also looked at Zhang Ping with an inquiring look. Didn't you say that no one would find out what you did for a while? Someone is staring at you like this, obviously for you. Zhang Ping was speechless. No one could explain if something happened to this thing. Wen Bai and Wen Yuan looked at each other. They did not expect the other party to come looking for them. Third brother Exon did not care about the matter and continued to stay silent. Yu Qianzhou laughed and said, High Priest Mi, what brings you here? Mi Russian ignored him and pointed at Zhang Ping. He said indifferently, Come with me. Damn it. I like people who are unreasonable because I like to be reasonable. Yu Qianzhou raised his eyebrows. He waved his hand at Zhang Ping and signaled him not to speak. He said in a deep voice, High Priest Mi, you sure are powerful. You want people to follow you, but they have to listen to you? Yu Qianzhou, this matter is not up to you to interfere. You're too meddlesome. You should think about how to protect your own life. Daong City will not let you hide forever, Mi Russian said expressionlessly. My life is in my hands. I don't need others to worry about it. But you, if you want to take my people away, you have to ask for my permission, Yu Qianzhou said bluntly. The scene of Ong Kuang Tsung Ching Fu coming to Fu Xian Island to ask for Guan Weiwu suddenly appeared in his mind. Guan Weiwu's silence made him feel cold. If he could not protect his own disciple, he would not be able to show his face anymore. Since when did Baiwan country's people become your people? Mi Russian squinted his eyes. Yu Qianzhou smiled coldly and said, Since when do you not need to worry about my people? Could it be that I still need to report everything to you? I want to ask you, what right do you have to take him away? You're asking him what he did. Mi Russian said sternly. Yu Qianzhou turned around and said, Zhang Ping, what did you do? Zhang Ping shook his head and said, I did not do anything. Chapter 5:12. Wen Bai and the other two were speechless. These two were acting shamelessly. Mi Russian stared at Zhang Ping with a livid expression and said in a deep voice, You dare to quibble in front of me, I think you are tired of living. High official Mi, you are wrong. Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly. It is understandable that he did something bad and did not admit it, but I really do not believe that he did something good and did not admit it. Birds of a feather flock together. You two shameless people, you have no choice but to leave today. Mi Russian narrowed his eyes and stopped arguing with them. He suddenly disappeared in front of everyone. Teleportation. The others were shocked. Yu Qianzhou's eyes flashed with fierceness. He quickly turned around and locked onto Zhang Peng's surroundings. Zhang Peng also knew the situation was bad. His shoulders shook and his protective energy surged out. As expected, Mi Russian appeared in front of him in an instant and slapped with his palm, trying to forcefully shatter the other's protective energy. How dare you? Yu Qianzhou attacked with his palm almost at the same time and shouted, Absorbing Star's great skill. Zhang Peng's cultivation was much lower than Mi Russian's. He tried to dodge but failed. Bang! His protective aura was instantly shattered. His whole body was sent flying to the corner of the wall, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Although Wen Yuan was a prince, he was only a mortal. Seeing this, he felt his heart palpitate. These cultivators were actually attacking right before his eyes. When Mi Russian attacked Zhang Ping, he had already turned around to look at Yu Qianzhou. Seeing that the latter wanted to fight him in cultivation, he sneered. After knocking down one of them with a single palm strike, Yi Shiwen quickly countered with a palm strike towards Yu Qianzhou. However, the moment he attacked again, Mi Russian suddenly shuddered. He felt like something was rapidly flowing out of his body and his body was rapidly stiffening. Especially when the meridians in his body were rapidly contracting. His vital energy could not flow smoothly. Dense white smoke gushed out from Mi Russian's body. Yu Yu Qianchou's palm was like a tube that attracted the wind. He followed Yu Qianchou's advice and sucked the dense white smoke into his palm. Mi Russian's entire body shrunk rapidly, revealing an outline that was even drier than a mummy. His appearance was extremely horrifying. Third brother Exen, Wen Bai and Wen Yuan were all dumbfounded. Crack. Mi Russian's palm was still moving, but the crowd saw a withered arm fly out from his sleeve. Yu Qianchou tilted his body slightly and watched as the arm brushed past him and smashed into pieces outside the hall. He turned around to look at the skinny skeleton in front of him and sneered, "You're really willing to sacrifice yourself to throw your arm out to hit someone." This joke was really cold. Seeing Mi Russian like this, Third Exen and the others could not help but shiver. They felt like they were in a dream as they stood there, recalling everything that had just happened. Mi Russian was already unrecognizable. His dried skin shrunk and his bones tightened. His appearance was extremely horrifying, but he still stood firm. From the contours of his face, one could faintly sense the fear he had before his death. Yu Qianchou glanced at Zhang Ping, who was slowly getting up from the corner of the wall while wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. A hint of fierceness flashed through his eyes. He walked to the mummy and said face to face, "High Priest Mi, you could have attacked anyone, but you had to attack my people. I will not give Hu Zongming any face. Please don't take offense and punish him lightly." He took out the storage pouch on the corpse's waist and with a wave of his hand, a burst of green flames incinerated the corpse into ashes. Mi Russian disappeared just like that. Exen Laosen and Wen Bai looked at each other in dismay. Now they finally understood how Tu Dingfeng died that day. The 4 words, "absorbing stars' great technique," were deeply imprinted in their minds. What a terrifying technique. Yu Qianchou looked as if nothing had happened. But in fact he was secretly happy that he had once again proven the power of the water art. But he also understood that Mi Russian died because he was caught off guard. Plus he was standing close to Mi Russian, which allowed him to maximize the absorption power of the water art. Otherwise it would not have been so easy to kill Mi Russian. Seeing that Zhang Ping was fine, Yu Qianchou cupped his hands at the others and said, "Goodbye." "Yu Qianchou, where are you going?" "I will go too." Third Exin flashed over. Yu Qianchou pointed at Zhang Ping and said, "He is seriously injured. I need to take him for treatment. Don't come and join the fun." "Are you seriously injured?" Third Exin looked at Zhang Ping suspiciously. He did not seem to be injured. He then asked, "What about your promise to go to Lingfang Valley with me?" "Don't worry. I am a man of my word. I will definitely do what I promised." Yu Qianchou confidently patted his chest. He thought to himself, "I have to go just to see what the most beautiful woman in the world looks like." He casually took out a jade archive and wrote something in it. He threw it to Third Exine. Third Exine looked at it and put it away. He nodded and said, "I understand." Yu Qianchou was about to turn and leave when he saw Wen Bai and Wen Yuan looking at the pile of ashes on the ground with a worried expression. He knew what they were worried about. He smiled and said, "I will bear the consequences of my own actions. Since I have already taken action, you can push all the blame on me. If they come to ask for Zhang Ping, tell them that I am the one who took Zhang Ping away and killed Mi Russian. Let them come to me. Goodbye." Then he left with Zhang Ping. The others looked at each other speechlessly. After a while, Third Exin also took his leave. Wen Bai hurriedly went to a remote wing of the embassy. Before Wen Rui arrived, he had spent a lot of effort and spirit stones to set up a communication formation in the wing to make it easier for him to contact his family. Wen Bai could use this formation to inform his family of what had happened here. On the peak of a mountain in Utopia, Yu Qianchou suddenly appeared with Zhang Ping in tow. Zhang Ping looked around. He was puzzled. Why did Master bring him here instead of returning to the military camp or Misty Palace? "Kneel!" Yu Qianchou suddenly shouted. Zhang Ping was shocked. He saw his master glaring at him under the moonlight. He hurriedly knelt down as instructed. Yu Qianchou stared at him and said in a deep voice, "Zhang Ping, I am warning you again. Today's incident happened in the imperial family. But I want you to remember one thing. Don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you're a cultivator. I, your master, dare to do anything except harm the common people. If I ever find out that the thing between your legs has harmed the common people, I have 1,000 ways to make you wish you were dead. Do you understand?" Zhang Peng's heart skipped a beat. "Your disciple understands. Chief Instructor Guan is currently studying and arranging a battle plan. If your injuries are not too serious, return to the team and prepare to be deployed, Yu Qianzhou said calmly. A simple warning was enough. Whether he listened or not was his business. If he listened, then so be it. If he didn't, then he wouldn't be lenient. Yes. Zhang Peng's eyes lit up. He liked this idea. He immediately flew towards the military camp. Under the moonlight, Yu Qianzhou took out a jade archive. He inserted his divine sense into it and carefully examined it again. It was a complete map of Daong Kingdom. Within Huazhongming's territory, there were a total of 17 spirit stone mines, all of which had high yields. According to the records in the Jade Archive, these spirit stone mines had to hand over their spirit stones at a fixed time every month. The scouting team that Yu Qianzhou had sent out did not disappoint him. Within the time that he had requested, they had successfully planted teleportation markers near the 17 spirit stone mines. If nothing changed, the day of handing over the spirit stones to Illumination Peak would be a few days later. If he were to rob them at this time, he would gain something. Actually, these spirit stone mines only produced a few 100,000 high-grade spirit stones per month. The 17 spirit stone mines only produced a few million spirit stones in total. This small amount of spirit stones was no longer enough for him to make a big fuss. If he really wanted to get his hands on spirit stones, it would be more worth it to just rob the spirit stones that they had accumulated for hundreds or even thousands of years. But this time he didn't just want to rob them. His main goal was to cause destruction. His goal was to take revenge on Huazhongming. Because of this guy, the contents of the Jade Archive had been made public, messing up all his plans. Moreover, Huazhongming had set himself against him. If he didn't take revenge, it would be difficult to quell the hatred in his heart. The reason why he hadn't left Daong City for the past few days was to wait for news from the scouting team. Moreover, there was another benefit to doing this. Today's incident would definitely infuriate Huazhongming. It would be good to do something else to distract him. Also, he wanted his team members to see more blood. After a while, Yu Qianzhou disappeared from Utopia and began to personally investigate every spirit stone mine. A thick fog suddenly appeared in the wilderness of a spirit stone mine. The mineshaft guards didn't care, as natural phenomena were not something that they could interfere with. After Yu Qianzhou had a clear understanding of the people's arrangements, he quietly retracted the thick fog and sent a message back to Guan Yu, who was arranging the battle plan. Then he appeared at the next spirit stone mine and continued the same process. Once the situation of the 17 mines was clear, the 17 teams in Utopia were ready to set off. After Yu Qianzhou returned, he brazenly gave the order to kill, rob, and destroy everything. Then he sent the 17 teams to the various mines. The 17 bloody massacres began. As expected, none of the team members were spared. They even flipped through every corner, killing and robbing everything. The cultivators in the mine had nowhere to run. They cried and screamed, and blood flowed like a river. Before they retreated, these team members rushed into the mine with a large number of astral breaching talismans. Starting from the innermost passageway, he blew them up one by one until all the passageways in the spirit stone mine collapsed. Every residential area in the mine was also blasted to the ground. After sending the last team back to Utopia, Yu Qianzhou stood on a hill under the light of dawn. He looked at the crippled spirit stone mine below and sneered to himself. Huazhongming, don't you like to play? I'll play with you until I'm injured. These collapsed spirit stone mines can let you play to your heart's content. Let's see how many years it will take for you to gather thousands of cultivators to mine. After he left, a shrill wind howled in the mountains. It was as if the souls of the cultivators lying quietly in a pool of blood were lingering, wailing about something. In the mess, a black triangular flag fluttered in the wind. The word hero bloomed in the blood. Chapter 513. In Utopia's military camp, Guan Yu looked solemnly at Yu Qianzhou, who was sitting across the table with his legs crossed. He had personally led a group of people to loot a spirit stone mine. When he saw the people he had personally trained massacring, he could not describe what he was feeling. He thought about how the people in the 17 spirit stone mines had all been killed. That was a few thousand people. He was shocked. He could not understand what Yu Qianzhou was trying to do. Why did he have to kill so many people? Unable to bear it, he ordered the few leaders to let the miners with low cultivation levels live. However, to his surprise, the few leaders did not carry out his orders firmly for the first time. One of them asked, "Chief Instructor, the order we received from the leader was to kill, rob, and destroy all of them. Did the leader change his orders? He paused for a moment before saying, "No. These miners with low cultivation levels won't pose any danger even if they stay. Why is there a need to kill them all?" The few leaders looked at each other and said in unison, "It's our duty to obey the leader's orders. Chief Instructor, please take back your orders and carry out the leader's orders." Guan Yu was speechless. He waved his hand and gestured for them to continue. Only now did he understand why Xianxia would place so much importance on the brainwashing education. He kept instilling in all his team members the necessity and benefits of being loyal to the leader, as well as painting a beautiful future for all his team members. After this test, he understood that although he had the right to train this army, the real commanding authority had always been in Xianxia's hands. This army would only listen to Xianxia's commands. Any orders that went against Xianxia's will could not be carried out in this army. "Why did you kill so many people?" Guan Yu asked. Xianxia closed his eyes and lay on the chair. He placed his feet on the table and swung them gently. As soon as he returned, he received a secret report from his subordinates, saying that Guan Yu had given an order that was contrary to his. He knew Guan Yu quite well. When he kidnapped this guy, he was only in the qi refining stage and had never experienced in the cultivation world. How could he know the dangers of the cultivation world? It was not surprising that he was soft-hearted. After a moment of silence, Xianxia did not reply to him. Instead, he opened his eyes and asked Zhang Ping, when you were in a war, what was the highest number of people you saw die in a battle?" "This is the most I've ever seen. More than 100,000 people died on both sides. The battlefield was filled with dead bodies as far as the eye could see," Zhang Ping replied. He glanced at Guan Yu with a hint of dissatisfaction. Guan Yu actually dared to go against his own master. He was someone who had been tempered by blood and fire on the battlefield. Just now he had killed to his heart's content, so he didn't have the heart to do so. A general's success is built on the bones of tens of thousands. Xianxia mumbled and put down his leg on the table. He stared at Guan Yu and shook his head. "Yun Chang, I'm not a homicidal maniac. I definitely wouldn't kill so many people for no reason. I naturally have my reasons for doing so. You're a good person, but sometimes you're too soft-hearted. Looks like I need to arrange for you to go out with me. What do you think?" Guan Yu was silent for a moment, then he shook his head and said, "Forget it. I don't need to change myself. This is good enough. In the future, let other people do the fighting and killing. I'll stay here and continue to do my own things." As he said this, his mind was thinking about the woman in white in Ethereal Palace. He sighed in his heart. "Let me watch over her silently. I'm willing to watch over her silently for the rest of my life. I don't want to go anywhere. I just hope to see her once in a while and I'll be satisfied." Xianxia didn't understand what he was thinking, but he could sense that he was a little depressed. He muttered, "That's fine too. From now on you should focus on training. The fighting and killing in the outside world really doesn't suit you." After exiting Dayong City's west gate, there was a wide official road. Following this road, it led to many countries. Third Brother Exen rode a horse and followed the instructions in the Jade Archive, following the official road. However, after walking for half a day, he didn't see Xianxia at all. He began to suspect that Xianxia was playing with him. As he passed by a col between two mountains, he suddenly heard the sound of rushing wind. Third Brother Exen caught it with his hand, turned his head and shouted, "Who's there?" He saw Xianxia walking out of the forest on the hillside, holding a green apple in his hand and chewing on it with a grin. Third Brother Xian's face lit up. He looked at the green apple in his hand and took a bite of it as well. However, he realized that it was so sour that his tongue was about to fall off. He quickly threw it away. Xianxia wasn't much better off. He was also vomiting non-stop. Third Brother Exen cursed, "Xianxia, how could you let me eat something so disgusting? Damn it. There's a wild apple tree in this forest. I took a bite and realized that it was disgusting," Xianxia said as he stuck out his tongue. "Then why did you eat it so happily? You tricked me on purpose." Sigh. "Didn't you say that we'd share blessings and misfortunes together? Why are you here?" Third Brother Exen looked around. Xianxia was still spitting out the acid in his mouth. He had paid a hefty price to trick him. As he vomited, he said, "I've been waiting for you here." In fact, the Jade Archive he gave Third Brother Exen contained a strand of his own consciousness. He could contact Third Brother Xian at any time. Third brother Exen had just arrived here and he had just left Utopia. He guessed that the cultivators guarding outside Daong City would have to wait in vain for a period of time. The two of them discussed where to go. Then they released their horses and flew away together. Light Illumination Peak, Great Hall of Light. Mi Ruhai wept bitterly as he told his master the news of his brother's death. Hua Zhongming's face was dark. He crushed the golden cup in his hand into a golden pancake. He said sternly, "Yu Qian, how dare you?" From this, it could be seen that Wen Bai had indeed followed Yu Qianchou's instructions and pushed all the blame onto him. Return to the palace first and detain the people from Baiwan Nation. I'd like to see how the Wen family will explain this to me. Hua Zhongming narrowed his eyes. I won't forgive Yu Qianchou. Master, there's one more thing. Mi Ruhai wiped his tears and said, the Wen family said that their ancestor Wen Lanfeng has come out of closed-door cultivation. What? Hua Zhongming was shocked. He asked again, what did you say? The Wen family said that Wen Lanfeng has come out of closed-door cultivation, Mi Ruhai repeated. In fact, when he found out that his brother had been killed last night, he had wanted to kill a few people from the Wen family to vent his anger. Who knew that Wen Bai would suddenly say that Wen Lanfeng had come out of closed-door cultivation, which shocked him. He naturally knew what kind of person Wen Lanfeng was. He was someone that even his master was wary of. Although he was angry, he did not dare to cause trouble for his master. He could only suppress his anger and return to Light Illumination Peak to report to his master. That love addict has come out of closed-door cultivation? Hua Zhongming slowly sat down and thought for a while. He sighed and said, don't touch the people from the Wen family for now. I'm no match for that guy. Don't provoke them for now. Wait until I've gathered the information. You go back first. He had no choice but to obey his master's orders. Mi Ruhai choked and left. At this moment, a strong man directly flashed into the Great Light Hall. After bumping into Mi Ruhai, he frowned and said, Ninth junior brother, what's wrong? This person was Hua Zhongming's eldest disciple Lu Qingjian. He looked much younger than Mi Ruhai, but in fact he was older than him. Mi Ruhai choked and said, Eldest senior brother, my eldest brother was killed by Yu Qianchou. What? Eighth junior brother was killed? What happened? Lu Qingjian asked in shock. Mi Ruhai rambled again. The former was so angry that he laughed and said, what a good Yu Qianchou. He dared to provoke our Light Illumination Peak. Qingjian, why did you come here in such a hurry? Hua Zhongming asked, feeling a headache coming on. Master, misfortune never comes alone. Lu Qingjian took out the little black flag of the hero and walked over. Our 17 spirit stone mines were destroyed overnight. What? Hua Zhongming stood up again and snatched the little black flag. After looking at it, he sneered, another hero. I thought he was only targeting Yin Baikong. So he specifically landed in our Daong kingdom to cause trouble. I wanted to watch Yin Baikong get into trouble. What do you mean by the spirit stone mines were destroyed? Lu Qingjian clenched his fists so hard that cracking sounds could be heard. 17 spirit stone mines were completely destroyed, and all the spirit stones that were delivered were looted. Several thousand disciples were slaughtered and not a single one of them survived. It will be very difficult to recover. The Great Light Hall instantly quieted down. Mi Ruhai no longer cried and quietly retreated. To Light Illumination Peak. This matter was much more important than his eldest brother's death. The 17 spirit stone mines were the main source of Light Illumination Peak's spirit stones. If he continued to cry, he might be punished by his master. It was better to obediently return. This is not looting. Someone is taking revenge on me. Otherwise there is no need to be so ruthless. Hua Zhongming's face was gloomy. He opened the flag in his hand and said with an unpredictable expression, the master of this hero should have a grudge against me. He is someone I know. 17 spirit stone mines were attacked in one night. Hehe. This was premeditated a long time ago. Master 8th Junior was killed on the same day as the attack on the spirit stone mines. Do you think this matter is related to Yu Qianchou? Lu Qingjian asked suspiciously. It shouldn't be. Hua Zhongming shook his head. This is not something that one person can do. It is impossible for us to not know that Yu Qianchou brought so many people from Wuxia. With his cultivation, it is impossible for him to travel to so many places in one night. As he said this, his face suddenly turned sinister. Investigate. Use all the people that can be used. Don't worry about other things. Investigate this matter first. I want to see who is behind this. Lu Qingjian immediately went to make arrangements. Such a big matter naturally could not be hidden. In a few days the news spread throughout the cultivation world. The mysterious hero once again caused an uproar in various countries. Yin Baikong, who was on Cornucopia's God of Wealth peak, had been depressed by the previous incident. He had mobilized his subordinates to investigate everywhere but to no avail. When he heard this news he was stunned at first, but then he laughed out loud. At first he thought that the hero was specifically targeting him. He did not expect it to be even more ruthless this time. That bastard Hu Zongming must not be laughing anymore. Perhaps he was also implicated by that bastard last time. The hero must have been cutting grass to kill a rabbit, robbing him along the way. In fact, the main target was Hu Zongming. Otherwise there was no need to be so ruthless. After thinking it through, Yin Baikong felt much better. After being depressed for a long time he finally decided to go down the mountain to see how business was going. Chapter 5:14. World Commerce. Speaking of world commerce, one had to mention its founder Yin Baikong. Yin Baikong could be said to be an extraordinary person in the cultivation world. It wasn't because of his high cultivation but because he liked doing business. He was unique among the spirit-severing experts in the cultivation world. It was because of this that he founded World Commerce. The headquarters of World Commerce was in Cornucopia. The tallest mountain in Cornucopia was called God of Wealth Peak. This series of names were all given by Yin Baikong himself. From this, it could be seen that Yin Baikong really did have a hobby of doing business. Even now, when his cultivation had reached spirit-severing late stage, he would still personally pay attention to business matters. Cornucopia could be said to be the most prosperous place in the cultivation world. Of course, Yin Baikong wasn't the only shop here. Otherwise his business wouldn't be so prosperous. Every country had their own shops here. The flourishing area around the foot of God of Wealth Peak was Cornucopia. Yin Baikong himself often stood on God of Wealth Peak and gazed down. Thinking back to the barren mountain valley that had become the flourishing area it was today, Yin Baikong was often very proud. Cornucopia Hall was where World Commerce's money came and went. The spirit stones that flowed here every day, if converted to high-grade spirit stones, were at least 10 million. At this moment in Cornucopia Hall, World Commerce's disciples were counting the spirit stones that flowed in and out. Jing Yuankong was overseeing this place. Yin Baikong had his hands behind his back. Like an old merchant he barged in and looked around. When World Commerce's disciples saw Yin Baikong, none of them actually said anything. They just glanced at him and then lowered their heads to do their own things. Jing Yuankong was slightly startled. Master had always been in a bad mood. Why did he come down today? It seemed like he was in a good mood today. Jing Yuankong hurriedly bowed and then led his master to the back hall. Because the front hall was a busy place, chatting was not allowed. This rule was set by Yin Baikong himself and he had always been the first to follow it. When they reached the back hall, Yin Baikong's first words were, "Has everything been normal?" "Everything is normal," Jing Yuankong replied. Yin Baikong nodded. "Cornucopia Hall is about to begin. How are the preparations?" "Everything is being prepared in an orderly manner. It won't affect the Cornucopia Hall," Jing Yuankong said seriously. Cornucopia Hall was the largest trading event in the cultivation world. It was held once every 10 years. At that time, there would be a large number of cultivators from various countries. It could be said to be exceptionally prosperous. It was also the time when the World Chamber of Commerce was rolling in money. The master and disciple talked about business for a long time. Finally, Yin Baikong asked, "How are the inner disciples doing?" "I'm not too sure about that," replied Jing Yuankong. Yin Baikong nodded slightly and did not blame him. Of the two disciples, Jing Yuankong was mainly in charge of business matters. The eldest disciple, Sikongju, was in charge of the affairs of the sect's disciples. Some of the more secretive matters had always been handled by the eldest disciple, Sikongju. Jing Yuankong didn't care about it, which made him feel more at ease. In fact, Jing Yuankong had also concealed one thing. He knew that Guan Zhongkai had been forced to admit defeat by Yu Qianqiu, but he did not mention it. After all, he was the eldest senior brother's disciple. If he were to say it, he would be suspected of sowing discord. As for whether or not the paper could wrap up the fire, the responsibility would not fall on his head in the end. East Sea Everlasting Island. When the news of the 17 spirit stone mines in Huazhongming's territory being looted spread, cultivators from various countries were discussing it. It became the hottest topic on the island. In the deep mountains and valleys of Wuxia Island, there was a constant rumbling sound. A phantom was flashing everywhere in the forest of rocks. Wherever the phantom went, the huge rocks would crumble into pieces. Man Hu and his fellow disciples were watching from the side of the cliff with their arms crossed. After a while, the rumblings stopped and the phantom flashed up the cliff. A cloud of black mist gradually dissipated, revealing Yan Zhuixing's naked upper body. His muscles were incomparably sturdy. Compared to his previous skinny and weak self, he was like a completely different person. After receiving the clothes from Man Hu, Yan Zhuixing looked at the broken rocks in the valley and shook his head. My demonic charm movement technique hasn't been able to make any progress. Looks like it won't work just by relying on external force. I need the help of the 7-star blood orchid. State Preceptor, where can I find 7 stalks of 7-star blood orchid? Man Hu muttered, I can think of a way to get 1 or 2 stalks, but I'm afraid it will be difficult to get 7 at once. Didn't you say that in the World Chamber of Commerce's upcoming cornucopia meeting, there is nothing you can't buy as long as you can afford it? I wonder if I can buy the 7-star blood orchid I need there? Yan Zhuixing asked. Don't worry, young palace master. I have already reported this matter to Master. Master will naturally pay attention to this matter. As long as the 7-star blood orchid appears, Master will definitely buy it at all costs. Man Hu said. Yan Zhuixing nodded, turned around and said with a smile, I wonder if there is anything new in the various countries recently? Man Hu and his fellow disciples looked at each other and found that this young palace master was becoming more and more concerned about the various countries. He would often ask questions. They didn't know what he was thinking, but he definitely wouldn't ask for no reason. They were afraid that there was an inside story that others didn't know. Something new happened yesterday. The 17 spirit stone mines in the Daong kingdom were looted overnight. After that, all the spirit stone mines were destroyed. Man Hu said with a smile. Oh. Yan Zhuixing's eyes flickered for a while and said with a faint smile, could it be that Hero did it again? Old Seven said strangely, young palace master, how do you know that it was done by Hero? Hehe. Seems like I guessed correctly. Yan Zhuixing looked back and thought that it wasn't the first time Yu Qianqiu did something like this. He had already done it when he was in China. This was completely Yu Qianqiu's style, stealing chickens and dogs and disturbing people's peace. Old Seven nodded repeatedly and said, young palace master guessed correctly. It was done by that hero. Damn it. I don't know who actually has the ability to rob 17 spirit stone mines in one night. Even Huazhongming couldn't do anything to him. He's probably hopping mad right now. Man Hu waved his hand at Old Seven and turned around to ask, young palace master, do you want to continue cultivating demonic arts or go back to rest? State Preceptor, I want to walk around the various countries. What do you think? Yan Zhuixing looked at the distant mountains and said slowly. What? The few of them said in surprise. They didn't know why he suddenly had such an idea. Yan Zhuixing turned around and said to the few of them with a faint smile, I often hear cultivators from various countries talking about the excitement of the cornucopia gathering. I really want to go and see if I can find the 7-star blood orchid I need. The few of them looked at each other. Man Hu frowned and said, the situation here is so tense. How can you leave, young palace master? The cornucopia gathering is held once every 10 years. Young palace master might as well go next time. The situation is tense? Yan Zhuixing glanced at the few of them and sneered, is it really tense? Why can't I see it at all? Although there are constant small battles, the various countries seem to prefer to waste time here. No one is willing to carry out the final battle. It doesn't matter if I'm here or not. This. Man Hu smiled bitterly and said, young palace master, don't be anxious. There is a reason for this. Wait a year or two and the various countries will definitely rush to attack. Yu Qianqiu walked to the edge of the cliff and kicked a stone. He watched him go down and said, what is the reason? Can State Preceptor tell me honestly? Man Hu thought for a moment and walked to stand beside him and said, this isn't a secret that can't be told. The various countries are all worried about the #1 expert in the world. By Tongchun. Yan Zhuixing retracted his gaze and stared at him and asked, Didn't you say that he wouldn't interfere if the soul formation realm cultivators of the various countries didn't personally interfere with the affairs of the Wuxia cultivation world? Why do they have to worry about him? Although that's the case, everyone would rather wait another year or two. Why? It's good that everyone abides by the agreement, but if the various countries force the Wuxia cultivation world to a dead end, Bai Changchun can go to the various countries even if he doesn't have to come to Wuxia. This was something that no one thought of at first. Only later did someone raise this doubt. The various countries thought that it would be better to wait for Bai Changchun to go to the East Holy Land. At that time, the various countries would join hands and the Wuxia cultivation world wouldn't be able to resist. Man Who explained. Yan Zhuixing sneered and didn't say anything. What did the various countries have to worry about? In the end, it was all because the soul formation realm cultivators were afraid that Bai Changchun would find trouble with them. Therefore they would rather hide like a tortoise. Thinking about it, it was funny. There were so many soul formation realm experts, but they were actually scared by one person. He really didn't know what to say. As for why the Wuxia cultivation world didn't gather all their forces to take the opportunity to eliminate the forces of Limitless Island, it was probably because of their old habits. Everyone was dragging each other's back. If you don't take out your capital, why should I take out my capital? Yan Zhuixing was born and raised here. He was very clear about the old habits of the Wuxia cultivation world. He didn't know what to say. Since I have to wait another year or two, I might as well go to the various countries. This matter is decided. Yan Zhuixing didn't know if he was saying this to them or to himself. Man Who said helplessly, since young palace master has decided to go, I will go and arrange it. The news of Yu Qianzhou leaving Deyang City had been spread by some people. All the cultivators were looking for him everywhere. Before the cornucopia meeting, the biggest event in the cultivation world, killing Yu Qianzhou was the most important thing for the cultivators of various countries. The 2 treasured sabers on him were something everyone wanted. Whoever found Yu Qianzhou first would have the chance to get the 2 treasured sabers first. For a time, the search for Yu Qianzhou was carried out in the cultivation world. Yu Qianzhou naturally knew that his situation wasn't very good. He pulled third brother Xian along and tried to keep a low profile. Third brother Xian was willing to bear the burden and was not afraid of hard work. He took the initiative to bring Yu Qianzhou to hide here and there. He wanted to bring him safely to Lingfang Valley. Chapter 5:15. The 2 of them sneaked along the way, flying and hiding. From time to time, there were cultivators wandering around in the sky and there were more and more signs. The 2 of them even found Foundation establishment disciples searching in the sky on their flying swords. This kind of small cultivator couldn't stop the 2 of them, but it was clear that they only sent them as eyes and ears, and didn't intend to rely on them to kill Yu Qianzhou. But they couldn't touch them because if they killed one they would attract a whole bunch of others. There was no other way, they could only hide. This kind of searching method was very scary, and in the end the 2 of them were forced to fly close to the ground in the deep mountains. They didn't dare to walk on the main road and could only hide in the deep mountains. Occasionally they would startle a flock of birds, and the 2 of them would quickly run far away, then hold their breath and hide. Soon they could see more than 10 cultivators quickly flying over, searching everywhere in the dense forest. Third brother Xian, you go back to Spirit Fang Valley first, I have a way to escape. Yu Qianzhou didn't know how many times he said similar words. However, third brother Xian always had a solemn expression on his face as he firmly refused. No, you were originally hiding in Deyang City. If it wasn't because I insisted that you follow me to Lingfang Valley and exposed your whereabouts, you wouldn't have ended up in this state. He was talking about the day before when the situation wasn't so critical. Because he randomly shouted in the mountains, it attracted an early tribulation passing cultivator to search. Third brother Xian was worried that if this person escaped, he would attract a large number of people, so he killed him on the spot. Who knew that the person who was killed had a restriction on him? This restriction was similar to the one that Yu Qianzhou used when he first went to Demon Ghost Domain to train. The person who searched must have carried a divine sense compass, and knew everyone's whereabouts like the back of his hand. Once the person died, the other party immediately knew their whereabouts. This was good, it was like poking a hornet's nest. After startling a group of people, this group of people startled others, and cultivators from various countries heard the news and came. This was called a chase, so the 2 of them were forced to suffer. Yu Qianzhou didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You can't be blamed for this. I can't hide in Deyang City forever. If I did, Hu Zhongming wouldn't have let me go. At least you won't be in danger in Deyang City for the time being. Third brother Xin stubbornly said. He was certain that he had implicated Yu Qianqiu. Third brother Xin, Uncle Xin, I'm begging you, please leave first. I really have a way to get out of here. If you don't King leave, I'm going to be dragged to death by you. Yu Qianqiu was just short of kneeling down and begging him. It wasn't a good feeling to be chased all over the mountains. He really couldn't take it anymore. As long as third brother Xin left, he could immediately teleport back to Utopia. With the teleportation mark planted by the scouts, he could go anywhere with ease. Third brother Xin suddenly turned around and stared at him. His breathing became heavier and his eyes reddened. Yu Qianqiu was startled and asked suspiciously, "What do you want?" "There aren't many people like you in the cultivation world." Third brother Xin shook his head and sighed. Yu Qianqiu was confused and asked blankly, "What do you mean? What's wrong with me?" "You'd rather give up your own safety than drag others down. A friend in need is a friend indeed," third brother Xin said emotionally. Yu Qianqiu bit a finger in his mouth. His expression was a little dazed. His thoughts had flown to the highest heavens. Damn it. You can buy people's hearts like this? Brother, although I'm older than you, please allow me to call you brother. Third brother Xin patted his chest and said, "Today I, third brother Xin, will say this. As long as you can escape from this, if you encounter any trouble in the future, just mention the names of the 9 brothers of the Xian family. We're all brothers. As long as there's anything we can do, we'll go through fire and water for you." Really? Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. Your 9th brother is a soul-forming expert. He'll go through fire and water for me? Don't worry, we 9 brothers are of one mind. We admire people like you the most. Third brother Xin sighed again. There aren't many people like you in the cultivation world. The 2 of them were actually squatting on the branches of a big tree. Yu Qianqiu was like an ape, one hand holding onto the branch above his head. Sunlight shone through the gaps between the leaves on his face. He plucked a leaf and spat it out, then plucked another one and spat it out. He didn't know what to say. After a long silence, Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sighed. Sigh. Being unruly is just my appearance. I didn't expect you to see through my true nature today. I'm ashamed. Just then a few whizzing sounds flew over their heads. The 2 of them immediately held their breath. From the sounds, they seemed to be at least in the middle stage of tribulation passing. Yu Qianqiu immediately turned hostile. He lowered his voice and shouted, "Third brother Xin, get the hell out of here. We'll talk about your nonsense after we escape back to Lingfang Valley." Yu Qianqiu, scold me all you want. I understand your feelings. Third brother Xin looked at him affectionately and said, "I'll be fine if I go out. But where can you go? You can't go anywhere. The entire cultivation world is looking for you. They're searching everywhere. At least if I'm here, I'll have a helper, right?" Yu Qianqiu was startled. Third brother Xian's words reminded him of something. Even if he could teleport out, there were people searching everywhere. He was afraid that once he showed himself, he would be chased by a large group of people. It would be troublesome. We'll share blessings and misfortunes together. Third brother Xin pointed to the front and said with a determined look, "Let's go out together." Yu Qianqiu looked in the direction he was pointing. He frowned and said, "After 2 more mountains, we'll be in the Jinshan country, right?" "Yes." "Pu Taidong's territory." Xin Laosan nodded with a thoughtful look on his face. The landscape of the Jinshan country gave them a headache just thinking about it. Third brother Xin had been here more than once. Naturally, he knew about it. Yu Qianqiu had read about it from a jade archive. There were almost no forests in the entire Jinshan country. There were only deserts and exposed rocky areas everywhere. Although the entire country seemed a little desolate, the most distinctive feature was the abundance of various mineral resources. In Yu Qianqiu's understanding, it was rich in all kinds of metals. The people in the country made a living by mining. All kinds of rare metals were highly sought after by the cultivation world. This was also where Pu Taidong's biggest source of income came from. But because there were no forests to hide, the terrain was too exposed. As soon as the 2 left the Deyang country's territory, they would immediately be exposed to the eyes of the public. When that happened, it would be difficult to hide. This is troublesome. Third brother Xin frowned deeply. After we get out, run southwest. Yu Qianqiu said with a stern look on his face. Ah. Third brother Xin said in surprise, you mean to go to the misty forest? Yes. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, let's go to the misty forest. Third brother Exin waved his hand and said, no, no. You came from the cultivation world of China. You might not know how powerful the misty forest is. The Eastern Holy Land, the Demon Domain, and the Misty Forest are the three forbidden areas of the cultivation world. Ordinary people can't go there. The Eastern Holy Land is mysterious and unpredictable. There is no return. There are countless demon ghosts in the Demon Domain, and the world's #1 expert oversees it. The Misty Forest is shrouded in 7-colored poisonous fog all year round. No one knows how deep it is. Even demigod experts are afraid to enter. At most they can only enter by relying on their powerful cultivation. Yu Qianqiu had seen what he said in the Jade Archive left behind by Lu Wanwan. On the topographic map of the Jinshan country, this place was marked with a blank space. It only stated, the Misty Forest, a forgotten corner. Shrouded in 7-colored poisonous fog all year round. Not worth paying attention to. Is there anything else besides the poisonous fog? Yu Qianqiu asked. I don't know. Third brother Exin recalled and said, my master did enter the Misty Forest, but he only went to the surrounding area to pick some poisonous plants to refine pills. However, my master said that he heard the roar of some wild beast, but he couldn't be sure. Might have been the wind. Because the 7-colored fog is too poisonous, it's hard to imagine what kind of venomous insect could survive in there. Yu Qianqiu pondered for a while. Since there was nothing else and he had taken the Rui pill, he shouldn't be afraid of the poison. Even if there was something strange, he could escape in time. A green flying sword flew out. Yu Qianqiu jumped down from the tree and landed on the flying sword. He said with a cold expression, Third brother Exin, it's time for us to part. Return to Lingfang Valley first. I'll find you when the time comes. No, we agreed to share fortune and misfortune together. How can I leave you alone? Third brother Exin waved his hand and pointed to the side. Worst comes to worst, we'll spend more time and take a detour. Once we reach Lingfang Valley with my master around, no one will dare to enter. Do you want me to hide in Lingfang Valley for the rest of my life? Yu Qianqiu sneered. If I really want to hide for the rest of my life, why would I hide in Lingfang Valley? Since everyone likes to play with me, I'll play with them. If I don't play until they stop, then my name isn't Yu Qianqiu. What do you want to do? Third brother Exin was stunned. Without saying anything, Yu Qianqiu rode his flying sword close to the ground and quickly flew through the forest. Third brother Exin paused for a while, then quickly chased after him. After hiding for a while, the two of them finally crossed 2 mountains. When they reached the dense forest at the foot of the mountain, they stopped. Looking from the forest, the lush green had gradually faded away. The gravel formed a desolate land in front of them. There were more than 10 people in the air watching the forest closely. Occasionally there were people flying over them. What do you want to do? Third brother Exin whispered in his ear. Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered as he pondered. He didn't answer him. According to the map, the dense fog forest was about 50 miles away from here if he went southwest. With his speed, he would definitely be stopped by an expert who was faster than him, and then he would attract a large group of people to attack him. It seemed like he could only let third brother Exin temporarily lure the enemy to buy some time for himself. Chapter 5:16. Third brother Exin, I need to discuss something with you. What is it? Third brother Exin looked around vigilantly and leaned his head closer. After you get out, run towards the northwest and help me distract them. Then I will secretly follow behind. Don't look at me like that. Don't worry, I won't go to the mist forest. You just need to distract them and I will be able to sneak out. Don't worry, didn't you see that they surrounded Deyang City like an iron bucket? I still managed to escape. Third brother Exin thought about it and agreed. He still couldn't figure out how Yu Qianqiu managed to escape from Deyang City. But he still asked worriedly, are you sure you can do it? Yes. Yu Qianqiu took out an ordinary black iron flying sword and handed it to him. Use this to escape later or else we will be exposed. And this, wrap it. He pulled out a large piece of black cloth and covered third brother Exion's head with it. Seeing how meticulous he was, third Exin started to believe that he really had a way to escape. He pulled the black cloth to cover his face and nodded to indicate that he was ready. Yu Qianqiu looked around and said without hesitation, go. Be careful. Third brother Exin stepped on his flying sword and flew out of the forest towards the northwest direction. Just as he got out, someone shouted, "Over there!" The dozens of people who stopped in the air quickly chased after him. A woo! Someone let out a long howl and called for his fellow sect members. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Xianxia hid below and stared at the sky. In the blink of an eye, there were hundreds of people flying over his head. This was obviously only a small portion of the people who were chasing after him. He couldn't help but grit his teeth in anger. Using such a big scene, they were trying to put me to death. I like it so I won't feel guilty when the time comes. A ruthless glint flashed across Xianxia's face. He waited until the sky became quiet for a short period of time. Then he rushed toward the southwest without saying a word, flying along the gravel ground of the Gobi Desert. Flying as low as possible would reduce the chances of being discovered. On the other side, third brother Xian was leading the way, attracting a large group of people. Third brother Xian suddenly felt a little excited. This was the first time he was being chased by so many people. But this was all thanks to Xianxia. However, his pursuer was not an idiot. After chasing for a while, he immediately realized that something was wrong. With Xianxia's cultivation, how could he fly so fast? Someone shouted, "Who's that?" At this moment, the sounds of fighting suddenly came from the southwest direction. Not good, it's a diversion. Xianxia is over there. Someone shouted. Everyone looked in the direction of his finger and saw dozens of people chasing after a figure flying close to the ground. A dense mass of green shadows blocked the pursuers. There was no need to guess. Those dense masses of green shadows were Xianxia's signature flying swords. Without the need for orders, the hundreds of people immediately stopped. One of the people in front shouted, "Cut in and block his way. We've been waiting for a long time. We can't let anyone take advantage of us." A group of people whizzed forward, intending to cut off Xianxia's path. Once the pursuers met up with the people blocking the way, they would naturally be able to surround Xianxia. Xianxia flew as fast as he could, cursing in his heart. Who would have thought that as soon as he flew out, a group of people would come over and discover him? They immediately chased after him. What else could he do? He released a bunch of flying swords to stop them and ran. Actually, he was right to choose the southwest direction. There were people blocking him in all the other directions except the southwest direction. Because the mist forest was in that direction, it was a natural barrier. There was no need to waste manpower to guard there. Take third brother Xian for example. Just when there was no one chasing after him, a few people came whistling through the air in front of him. Without saying a word, they joined hands with their flying swords and attacked him wildly. Third brother Xian dodged with a teleportation and cursed, "You old bastards, just you wait. I'll settle the score with you after this is over." As soon as he teleported away, the others felt something was wrong. Someone recognized the voice and shouted, "Stop fighting. It's third brother Xian." In the distance there were continuous bangs. Green lights flashed. The few of them looked at each other and ignored third brother Xian's curses. They quickly rushed to the place where the fight was happening. As long as they could get the two swords, it would be a great contribution. Even if the Xian brothers wanted to deal with them, their master would protect them. Third brother Xian stopped in the air. He looked at the direction of the fight. He was stunned. The strong wind blew the black cloth off his body. His eyes were wet. He muttered to himself emotionally, "You lied to me. We said we'd share blessings and misfortunes together. Why did you bear the hardship alone? Xianxia, you lied to me." Third brother Xian screamed at the sky. He lost control of the flying sword under his feet. His silhouette flashed and with a whoosh, he quickly rushed to the place where the fight was happening. The dozens of people chasing him did not have high cultivation. Other than the 10 who were at the early stage of passing calamity, the rest were about the same level as Xianxia. Xianxia's 1,000 flying swords killed more than 10 original infant stage cultivators. As for the rest, Xianxia was confident that he could kill them all. But now was not the time to fight them. It would be troublesome if the others arrived. He was already halfway there. He could faintly see a rainbow in the distance. It was quiet, desolate, beautiful and mysterious. It should be the forgotten corner of the world. The fog forest. The middle stage tribulation transcendence realm cultivators, who were chasing Xianxia, suddenly saw a large group of people coming from the northwest. They exchanged glances and with a speed that was even faster than Xianxia's, they dashed in front of him. Xianxia, on the other hand, dodged left and right with his exquisite sword control skills. He managed to evade the slashes of the sword auras and continued to fly forward without a care for his life. It seemed like he wanted to reach the fog forest at all costs. But because he was flying close to the ground, the gravel exploded on his body, making him grimace in pain. A bunch of bastards. Just you wait. If I don't take revenge, I am not a man. Xianxia growled, gnashing his teeth. Since they had already been discovered, there was no longer any need for them to fly close to the ground. Otherwise, even if they were not killed by the other party, they would end up with a bloody nose and a swollen face. He quickly flew up on his sword and increased his flying altitude. Ah! With a muffled roar, he activated his sword art. The 1,000 flying swords formed a 2-meter-wide rectangular sword array and wrapped him in it. The Xian rectangular sword array rotated quickly. A Xian whirlwind carried him forward quickly. It was a spectacular scene. The few people who were fighting and flying in front of him had just attacked a few flying swords in the rotating sword array when the other flying swords came flying at them. Just the formation alone was enough to give them a fright, and they quickly dodged. The flying swords that were hit away quickly returned to the sword array and protected Xianxia as he moved forward quickly. The few of them attacked one after another, but they could not do anything to Xianxia. He did not even stop to fight with them and only cared about charging forward. Looking at the hundreds of people flying towards them, the few of them became anxious. One of them shouted, "Xianxia, leave your treasured saber and we will let you go. We will spare your life. Spare your mother. You trash, come and take it if you have the ability." Xianxia cursed. Suddenly he noticed a large group of people blocking his way. He felt helpless. If he had not been delayed by these bastards and wasted some time, he would have already charged in. Looking in all directions, there were many people rushing over. They were densely packed and they were all flying towards this place. It seemed like all the people chasing him had heard the news and were here. In front of him, the misty fog forest was surging with illusory colors. It was a vast, mysterious and boundless world. Like a seductive young lady, she was shrouded in a colorful and mysterious veil. For countless years, countless people wanted to remove this mysterious veil and kiss this young lady. However, behind the seduction was a naked ruthlessness. In the end, people flinched and gradually forgot about this mysterious young lady. Since they could not kiss her, they might as well forget about her. Originally, it was rare for anyone to come to this place for thousands of years. Wind and frost carved out a desolate aura in this field made of gravel, telling the occasional visitor that this place had been quiet for a very, very long time. However, this silence was broken today. Xianxia's crazy charge forward made the people blocking him guess something. Among the hundreds of people blocking him, there were more than 10 who were far ahead of the people behind them. This proved that their cultivation was higher than the others. Not good. This kid is going all out. He would rather die in the fog forest than let the treasured saber fall into the hands of others. One of them expressed his judgment. "Hee, you want to die? It's not that easy. Even if you want to die, you have to leave the treasured saber behind." Another person laughed sinisterly. As they spoke, they completely exposed the nature of the cultivation world where the strong preyed on the weak. The cultivators of the various countries have heard the news and are here. Hurry up just in case. We will stop him first. Those behind follow up. Let's go. The person who was flying the fastest shouted. Since he was able to command everyone, it was obvious that he was the leader of this group of people. More than 10 people disappeared on the spot at the same time. They appeared in front of them once, then disappeared and appeared again. More than 10 people used teleportation at the same time. This meant that all of them were experts at the end of the tribulation passing stage. It was obvious that this group of people was determined to get the treasures. After teleporting 3 times, they lined up in front of the bewitching fog forest. They coldly looked at the spinning Xian sword formation that was rushing towards them. Naturally, the one inside the formation was Xianxia, their target. They were originally about the same distance from Xianxia to the fog forest. Moreover, their flying speed was obviously faster than Xianxia's. However, just in case, they actually teleported to intercept him. The 700 to 800 people behind them had already flocked over and lined up behind the 10 people. The person in the lead stared at the people who were entangled with Xianxia and let out a cold laugh. He waved his hand and said, "Go chase away those flies behind us. At the same time, cut off all of that kid's escape routes. The treasures are ours." Almost 200 people immediately flashed behind him and surrounded him. Chapter 5:17. Within the territory of Jinshan country, only the master of this place, Pu Taidong, could mobilize 700 to 800 cultivators and use 14 masters at the final stage of nature's test at once. When they were in the territory of Daong country, Pu Taidong didn't send anyone deep into the country because of his relationship with Hu Zhongming. However, he sent a large number of people to block the border between the two countries and silently guard here. As long as Yu Qianzhou came here, he couldn't escape from their sight. What made these people rejoice was that Yu Qianzhou was really capable. He actually managed to escape from the encirclement of Deyang City. It was simply a miracle. Since God had given him such a big gift, how could they let him slip away again? Of course not. The leader was Pu Taidong's first disciple, Bai Meng. He secretly decided that he couldn't miss this opportunity. He must give the 2 treasured swords to his master. With a wave of his hand, 200 disciples surrounded the dozen people who were entangling with Yu Qianzhou. Fellow cultivators of Hassa, get out of the way. Otherwise don't blame us for being rude. It was Bai Meng's first disciple, Dian Yuming, who said this. The situation was stronger than the person. With a large number of people led by his master behind him, he was more confident. The people who were entangling with Yu Qianzhou all changed their expressions. They also understood that the situation was stronger than the person. They all stopped and didn't dare to act rashly. They were cultivators of Hassa. This time they also sent nearly 100 people, including 5 or 6 masters at the final stage of nature's test. However, the top masters were not in this direction. When they arrived, it would be too late. But there was no other way. It was better than dying. It was just a pity for the dozen people who were killed by Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou narrowed his eyes. There was a fierce light in his eyes. Although he saw that the dozen people could teleport and knew that they were masters at the final stage of nature's test, he didn't slow down and kept rushing forward. The misty forest with surging dreamy colors was just behind them. As long as he could get through it, he would have a place to stand and play with them slowly. Humph. He doesn't know what's good for him. Bai Meng waved his hand again and said, "Stop him before the others arrive. I'm afraid that something might happen if I delay." The 500 to 600 cultivators behind him rushed forward one after another. In an instant, flying swords fell like rain and silver lightning roared crazily. They interweaved into a magnificent silver net and swept forward. Even though Yu Qianzhou had 1,000 flying swords, he would not be able to gain the upper hand against 500 to 600 flying swords that were controlled individually. Concentrating on controlling one sword was definitely better than controlling thousands of swords at once. Kaka. Yu Qianzhou continued to charge towards the hundreds of flying swords with a sinister smile on his face. His violent nature, which was bound to explode under pressure, was revealed without a doubt. He charged forward without fear of death. When he was about 100 meters away from the opposite flying sword, he rushed forward with his arms wide open and shouted, "Star Flame Fire Art." At this point he had no choice but to fight unless he retreated back to Utopia. However, they were destined to have a showdown today, so how could they cower? If they wanted to run, they would have done so long ago. Since the other party wanted to force him into a dead end, then there was no need for him to pretend to be kind. From today onwards they would not stop until one of them was dead. Those who were afraid of death would leave, and those who weren't would continue to play to the end. Boom. A cyan storm suddenly exploded. Cyan flames swept away the clouds and rushed out unscrupulously, spreading rapidly. The scorching heat crazily flooded in all directions in a split second. The thousands of flying swords instantly flashed back into the flames, disappearing without a trace. A huge green light shone between the heaven and earth. Even though the group of people had heard that this guy knew how to do this, when they saw it for themselves, it was simply shocking. They could not imagine how a person could store such a large amount of flames in his body. The people surrounding him were shocked and involuntarily retreated from the high temperature. The 500 to 600 flying swords were instantly swallowed by the surging green flames. The expressions of the 500 to 600 people changed. The moment the flying swords rushed into the sea of flames, they immediately lost contact with them. It seemed like they had been disarmed by the other party in an instant. Facing the surging green flames, the 500 to 600 people had no choice but to retreat. Use the sword intent to break his fire. Bai Meng shouted because everyone knew that Chu Dingfang's sword intent had broken the green flames. It was obvious that the sword intent was not afraid of the high temperature of the green flames. 14 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage flashed to the front. 14 heaven-raising swords appeared, wanting to shred the surging green flames into pieces. Don't! Third Xian's sorrowful cry came from afar. He clearly saw the 14 heaven-raising swords and could tell that these 14 people were experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. With 14 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage joining hands, it was hard to imagine what would happen to you, Xianxia. If you want to break my green flames, then I will break your sword intent. Within the green flames, Xianxia shook his sleeves. Slippery black shadows continuously flashed out from his sleeves and hovered in front of him. The instant the 14 heaven-raising swords chopped down, Xianxia pushed out his palms and shouted, "Kill!" Just as the 14 huge transparent sword intent chopped down with a strong wind and broke the green flames, a group of densely packed black shadows suddenly shot out from the green flames like lightning. What did it mean to destroy everything? What did it mean to destroy everything? What did it mean to be successful in every endeavor? Today Xianxia's black flame flying swords would give Pu Taidong, the disciple of a mid-divine transformation stage expert, a wonderful demonstration. Back then Xianxia relied on the black flame flying swords to defeat 2 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage in the Battle of Wanghai Town in Wuxia. From then on, Xianxia regarded the black flame flying sword as a supreme treasure, and he treated it as his trump card. He wouldn't easily use it unless it was a critical moment because once it was used it would kill. This was his trump. Now everyone in the cultivation world wanted to force him into a dead end. The killing intent in his heart was boiling. Since everyone in the world has betrayed me, why should I think of myself as a sentimental person? Kill. Swish swish swish. Hiss hiss hiss. As dense as rain the black shadows flashed. The 14 sword intent disintegrated in an instant and disappeared without a trace. The collapse was so sudden that the 14 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage found it hard to believe. The pupils of the 14 people suddenly shrank as they saw the densely packed black dots shooting toward them. They were all pure black flying swords. They were unbelievably sharp, cutting through the sword intent as if they were cutting paper. Among the 14 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, a few reacted quickly. Protective aura surged out to block the flying swords. Bai Meng saw this from the corner of his eyes and was instantly shocked. If the black flying swords could so easily break through the sword intent, then no matter how strong the protective aura was, it would not be difficult to break through it. There's something strange about the flying swords. Don't fight them head-on. As Bai Meng shouted, he quickly flew into the air. A few people who did not set up protective aura also saw the clues and quickly flew into the air. At this moment, life and death could be decided in an instant. It was too late for the 5 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage who had protective aura. In addition, they had protective aura so they couldn't even teleport. They just bounced up. Ah! 5 shrill screams were heard. The protective aura was instantly pierced through by the flying swords, and it did not have any effect on blocking the attacks. The bodies of the 5 people trembled in the air. They were pierced by the flying swords like sieves, and their bodies were full of bloody holes. Then like kites with broken strings they fell straight to the ground. However, before their bodies fell to the ground, they were swallowed by the surging green flames. It was impossible to see them again, not even their ashes. 7th junior brother. 3rd junior brother. 9th junior brother. Bai Meng and the others who had just jumped into the air all cried out in pain. At this moment, another 5 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage appeared. They were the people who had stopped 3rd Xian and attacked together. These 5 people were the 5 top masters from Hasa. They couldn't wait to stabilize their bodies and stop in the air. They looked at each other. They saw the scene just now with their own eyes. The green flames surged and the black swords rained fiercely, killing 5 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage in an instant. Although they weren't familiar with the 5 people who died, they had met them before. The 5 people who died were also at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage like them, and the number of people who died was the same as them. The 5 people were frightened and didn't dare to rush over again. It was better to wait and see first. 3rd Xin, who followed closely, also stopped beside the 5 people. He looked at all of this with his eyes wide open and he couldn't wrap his head around it for a long time. Oh my! This guy killed 5 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage in an instant. The 500 to 600 people who saw it with their own eyes were even more shocked. How was it possible? In the blink of an eye, 5 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage died just like that? Run! Someone in the crowd screamed and everyone immediately scattered in panic. After the black swords killed the 5 people, they didn't stop at all. First they scattered thinking that they were going to chase Bai Meng and the others. Then they suddenly turned around and surrounded the 500 to 600 people behind them. The 500 to 600 people were scared out of their wits. They were disarmed by Qinghua just now, and didn't even have a weapon in their hands. Everyone was shocked by the situation just now and they were suddenly attacked like this. It was really fatal. It wasn't that they didn't have a way out. The way out was right behind them. The misty forest that was shining with psychedelic colors. For them, what was the difference between this and having no way out? For a moment, everyone took out everything in their storage pouches that they could use to block the attack. Hee hee. A sinister laughter came from the green sea of fire, and the densely packed black flying swords madly strangled them. In an instant, the wailing and wailing made everyone who heard it tremble. The bloody scene of the massacre would give people nightmares at night. It could only be described as too horrible to look at. None of the things they took out could block the strangling of the black flying swords. When this black sword net fell, only the 100 people who reacted quickly at the beginning escaped. None of the remaining 400 to 500 people were spared. Limbs were broken and flesh and blood were flying everywhere. Yu Qianchou. Bai Meng clenched his fists tightly, and used all his strength to shout for them to stop.